an inveterate optimist. You continue to believe that it can be done, that the climate change challenge can be met. Does it worry you that right now it seems the political winds in many countries are blowing in the wrong direction? Governments and voters seem to be extremely apprehensive about the costs that they perceive to be coming with the energy transition.
You are right. There are some recent political developments which are not necessarily in favor of the fight against climate change. But what makes me hopeful or encouraging is today, men in the street in New Delhi, a woman in Jakarta, or the kids playing football in Rio de Janeiro are establishing the links between the extreme weather events and the fossil fuel consumption and fossil fuel companies. So this establishing the links around the world of the developing world is a very powerful driver, in addition to what is happening in Europe, New York, or whatever it is.
Fatih Birol, I thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
Thank you very much, sir.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Jeff Goods. You're listening to CBC Radio 1.
Good morning, Manitoba. Welcome to Friday. Yes, you made it to Friday. It is Friday, December 8th. It's Pat Kanuga in for Marcy Marcusa for another day here on Information Radio. Thank you for joining us. Nice to have you here. We have lots of interesting stuff coming up on the show, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment. I'm going to say hello to the team this morning. Abby Adiemi is directing the show. Good morning, Abby. And May McKillop is making sure we're on the air, filling in for Abby while Abby fills in for me. And Travis Peterson is making sure that we're up on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page this morning. So right now we are 2.5 minutes away from the top of the clock in World Report. Let's see what's happening locally. Here's Heather Wells with news headlines.
Good morning. MPI is suing Ford Motor Company of Canada over a vehicle fire the insurer claims was related to a block heater. That fire involved a Ford Escape parked with its block heater plugged in at a business in Winnipeg in 2021. We're going to hear more about what happened there. And more than 100 people were at the Manitoba Legislative Building for an official lighting of the menorah just after sundown. Premier Wab Kinew lit one of the candles. We're going to hear about Hanukkah in Winnipeg this year coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells with news headlines. She mentioned that block heater fire. We're actually speaking with someone from the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service at around 10 to 8 this morning about how block heater fires can be started in vehicles. So that is coming up at 10 to 8. In the next hour of Information Radio, the federal government announced its plan yesterday to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the oil and gas industry. Warren Mabey of Queen's University is going to join us. That's at about 20 after 6. And as well, get this, alcohol-free bars are opening both here and around the world. Here in Canada, that is. CBC's Jason Osler is going to find out what's behind that trend, and we'll be listening to that at around 6:45 or so. In the weather, well, it is 1 on the outside right now at the Forks, on the way to a high of +1 today, according to John Sauter, meteorologist here. We're expecting some wet snow overnight. We haven't seen that in the Winnipeg area, but it is coming. We have some snowfall warnings for southern and northern Manitoba, which we'll get to after World Report. But it could be a bit of a messy day ahead for a good chunk of Manitoba. You are listening to Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the CBC Listen app. World Report is coming up next. Hi, Warren. Good morning. That's okay.
Good morning from
right,
CBC News. I'm John Northcott. Quebec's public sector unions are banding together, kicking off a week-long strike today. That means no school for public elementary, high school, or junior college students today. The Quebec union's rejecting the government's latest contract offer. They say workers need more money and better working conditions. Sarah Levitt has more.
Outside schools, hospitals, and health clinics across Quebec, the same symphony. Noisemakers, drums, and chanting employees on strike. New public sector worker contracts with the Quebec government unresolved. Today, the group of unions known as the Front Commun are back on the picket line for 7 days. 420,000 workers.
Ce serait un drame.
Accepting the latest offer would be a tragedy, says Magali Picard, who heads the FTQ union. The Front Commun strike overlaps with another one. The FAE, another union representing teachers, has been on an unlimited strike for 2 weeks. It means public schools across the province are shuttered for the next week. In Gatineau, English teacher Chantal Berthiaume says the strike is tough on the wallets.
There's no going to be like Christmas gift this year. It's going to be like strictly the minimum.
But she says it's worth it.
Cannot complain. I'm doing this for my kids and my students.
At the National Assembly, Premier François Legault made his impatience known.
C'est pas normal que notre réseau.
It isn't fair to have the unions run the public sector, he said. But he says the government continues to show good faith at the negotiation table to resolve these strikes as soon as possible. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
CBC News has learned a group of Canadian Muslims is leaving the federal Liberal Party's top donor ranks. It's called the Network 100, and its members say they're frustrated by the Prime Minister's refusal to call for a permanent ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Rafi Boudjikanian reports.
Thank you, my friends. When Justin Trudeau surged to his first victory in 2015, Mohamed Abulkasim was rooting for him.
We believed the promises Justin Trudeau was marketing.
And that support was not just at the ballot box. Abulkasim was among Canadian Muslims who organized to form a group called the Network 100. They brought together not just campaign volunteers for the Liberals, but donations. They say they have collectively contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to the federal Liberals since then. But that's all changing. Abulkasim says his group has taken issue with what they believe is a soft stance by the party's leadership on the number of Palestinians killed by the Israeli military's bombings against Hamas. Though Trudeau has criticized Israel in recent weeks,
I urge the government of Israel to exercise maximum restraint.
He has not called for a permanent ceasefire. After waiting close to 2 months, the network has written to the Liberal Party president, informing him they are leaving the Laurier Club in protest. That's a donor club where the Liberals expect at least $1,700 a year in individual contributions.
We cannot sleep at night. You sleep and you get up. There's at least 50 Palestinians getting killed.
Asked about the network halting future donations, the Liberal Party said in a statement, Canadians choose to donate to political parties for a variety of reasons, including to support a specific cause or policy position. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
It's been 9 weeks of war between Israel and Hamas. In Israel, the constant threat of rockets. In Gaza, relentless airstrikes. Hundreds of thousands of people are displaced, and there are reports that is now causing huge food shortages.
We continue to recognize the extraordinary difficulty of this task, as Israel is dealing with a terrorist adversary that intentionally embeds itself with civilians.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is now pressuring Israel to do more to protect civilians.
But again, Israel has an obligation to do everything possible to put a premium on protecting civilians and maximizing humanitarian assistance. And there does remain a gap between the intent to protect civilians and the actual results that we're seeing on the ground.
The Israel Defense Forces says it has struck 450 targets in the past day. It says it's discovered another cell preparing to launch rockets at its forces. Today, the United Nations Security Council will meet, and under intense pressure from Secretary General Antonio Guterres, it will vote on whether or not to call for an immediate ceasefire. Hunter Biden is facing 9 new criminal charges. The son of the U.S. president is charged with 3 felony and 6 misdemeanor tax offenses. Federal prosecutors are accusing him of not paying at least $1.4 million in federal taxes. They claim he instead spent the money on drugs, escorts, luxury hotels, exotic cars, and clothing. Hunter Biden's attorney claims today's charges are politically motivated. As the U.S. Congress battles over funding for border security aimed at its southern border, in Canada, the RCMP tells CBC News more migrants are turning to this country as a way of illegally crossing into the United States. The CBC's Jorge Barrera reports.
This Facebook video of a man playing in the snow in northern Vermont seems playful on the surface, but U.S. authorities say it was filmed in February by a Guatemalan national as he headed to pick up people smuggled from Quebec into the U.S. While Elmer Bran Galvez was never charged, U.S. authorities say he worked for a New Jersey-based human smuggling organization.
There's a lot of money to be made to smuggle individuals across our borders.
Mathieu Bertrand is RCMP Chief Superintendent of Serious and Organized Crime and Border Integrity Policing.
Organized crime is involved in human smuggling.
He says there's a marked increase in the use of Canada as a conduit, specifically across the Ontario and Quebec border with New York and Vermont. The most recent U.S. numbers back that up. There were nearly 7,000 Border Patrol interceptions in a 12-month period through this area. Bertrand says the cross-border nature of the issue makes it hard to tackle.
Just because an individual can be charged in the United States doesn't mean we have the grounds in Canada at the time or at any time during the investigation to do the same.
U.S. authorities say Bran Galvez's videos provided clues to help take down the organization and indict 3 people on human smuggling charges, including a man living in Montreal named Simon Jacinto Ramos. But there is currently no warrant for his arrest in Quebec. Jorge Barrera, CBC News, Ottawa.
And finally, good morning to everyone except employees in the House of Commons, where it's still Thursday. No, seriously, listen to this.
Madam Speaker, I believe that if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent.
Well, that's right. Members of Parliament are still awake, and they're still voting on the legislation they were supposed to pass yesterday. But the Conservatives have made good on their threat to drag it out as long as possible. You just heard Leader Pierre Poilievre there coming forward with a motion he did not seem to have unanimous consent for. Our Janice McGregor woke up before dawn and tuned into the proceedings while she was brushing her teeth. Janice, are they still at it?
Yes, John, and they've got potentially hours to go yet. 135 votes, perhaps, in total could last well into this afternoon, even beyond, if no one backs down here. Liberal benches on the government side still quite populated. As I woke, I saw the Prime Minister, his deputy, the Finance Minister, many cabinet ministers still voting in person, not taking any chances with these, which are confidence votes. On the opposition benches, the turnout a bit more sparse hour to hour. MPs do have the option to vote electronically in comfier surroundings if they wish, but they have to show their faces to Commons staff. They can't nap and have someone else punch it in for them. Pierre Poilievre left for a few hours last evening to attend a Hanukkah event in Montreal, but he returned to the Commons lobby late in the evening carrying massive bags of fast food to rally his MPs.
Bring it home! Everybody. Bring it home! It's extra time away from family. It's hard on your health, but we have to make the point. We said we would fight to axe the tax.
House Leader Karina Gould is having to lead her troops through this all-nighter, notwithstanding the fact that she's close to going on maternity leave, and she wasn't holding back her feelings at Poilievre's tactics.
He is leading the charge when it comes to that extreme right-wing agenda that is all about shutting down the government, holding back vital supports to Canadians, and we will stand up to him.
The Conservatives say they're doing this to take a stand against carbon taxes, but these aren't actually votes about the carbon tax. The House of Commons always has to pass a set of votes near the end of the calendar year to authorize a long list of government spending estimates. Things have been known to get a bit punchy with these votes year to year, but the dial for this year's silly season seems to be turned all the way up to 11.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa, thanks for keeping a bleary eye on all of it.
You're welcome.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. Welcome to what 6:10 in the a.m. feels like on a Friday morning here. You did make it to Friday. It is Friday, December 8th. You're listening to Information Radio. It is Pat in for Marcy again. Thank you for joining us in this hour of the show. A new report looks at loneliness and isolation among Canadian seniors. We'll hear more from Dr. Samir Sinha. That's coming up at about 10 to 7. Also, the federal government announced its plan yesterday to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the oil and gas industry. We're going to be speaking with someone from Queen's University in just a few minutes to explain it all to us. And first up on the show, ever driven past an elaborate Christmas scene in mid-July here in Winnipeg? Well, you can thank our thriving Christmas film industry for that. A bunch of them are on TV at this time of year. We're going to hear from two actors who have feigned holiday cheer during the hottest time of the year. That's all coming up in this hour of Information Radio. Well, I hope your morning is going well. It's early morning, and I hope it is a good one for you as we take on this Friday. Lots of stuff happening in the news and out and about. Lots of Christmas parties at this time of year, and we are expecting a bit of some white stuff, which we'll get to in just a minute after Heather Wells' Look at News headlines.
Good morning. A Winnipeg woman is challenging the police account of her partner's death after he was shot and killed by an officer last week. Carrie Bladen says Dustin Hatcher didn't deserve to die despite being on the run on outstanding charges she says resulted from his challenges with addictions. Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit says a 39-year-old man was shot after an officer was pinned by a vehicle trying to flee a traffic stop near Dalhousie Drive. So we'll hear more on that story, as well as Jewish Winnipeggers mark Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights. We're going to hear about how a rabbi hopes his mobile menorah can help dispel the darkness of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Those stories and more coming up in our next news at 6:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells on the news desk this morning, of course. And at 6:12 in the morning, Abby Adiemi has popped by here to let us know what's happening with some of the weather, especially here in Winnipeg. And I'll get to some snowfall warnings in a second. But first, what do you see there?
Yeah, good morning, Pat. Currently here in Winnipeg, we are at 1, according to John Sutter's forecast. We're going to be having a mainly cloudy day all morning with wet flurries, and then wet snow will be coming beginning afternoon, and of course we'll be getting about 5 to 10 centimeters of snow late Friday night. You know, according to John, he says that's depending on how much melts on contact. So that's what we'll be getting. But remember, also plus that, we'll be expecting some freezing rain in this early morning period as you prepare to set out. And of course, we'll be heading to a high of +1. Heading to a high of 1 today, rather. Tonight, the snow is going to be, we're still going to experience that snow. And looking at the satellite images we're getting now, Pat, I see like snow all over, like Dauphin, Brandon, Boissevain, almost everywhere, Pat.
Yeah, I just took a picture of it, actually, Abby, and not that you can see it from here, but I'll hold it up to the camera for YouTube. But I'm going to describe what I see here and what you're seeing there, and which is leading us to these snowfall warnings, which I'll get into now. So a lot of snow and cloud cover over southwestern corner up into Dauphin, Fairford, and I see snow and rain up around Lake Winnipeg and north of Gimli. And so all this is going to make its way here by this afternoon to Winnipeg, but Environment Canada has issued a couple of snowfall warnings for southern Manitoba. There's too many places here to list, but including Brandon, Neepawa, Carberry. We have Verdun, Souris, Melita, Boissevain, Turtle Mountain Provincial Parks, Dauphin, Riding Mountain, Grand Rapids, Waterhen area, a lot of that area. So again, it's kind of that southwestern corner and then up into the Parkland region. We do not have a snowfall warning that includes Winnipeg yet at this point. There is also a snowfall warning for Island Lake, Oxford House, and God's Lake up north. And we're saying 10 to 15 centimeters of snow is expected from a low pressure system. So again, besides that snow that is there right now and swirling around, it's going to be very windy today here in the city as well. Wind gusts 40 to 60 throughout this afternoon and evening. So it's going to be a blustery night if you're out and about this evening. Once again, we are 1 right now, and we're not really going to move too much from that temperature. In traffic, 788-3093 is the traffic line. If you see anything, Abby is standing by to take your calls in traffic for your commute this morning. It is 15 minutes after 6 o'clock. You are listening to Information Radio. And up first on the show, we're going to speak about the what happened in Ottawa yesterday. So the federal government announced a major plan yesterday to have this country do its part in slowing global warming. It's a strategy to limit greenhouse gas emissions in the oil and gas industry using a so-called cap and trade system. For more on what it involves, we're joined by Warren Mabey. He is the director of Queen's University Institute for Energy and Environmental Policy, and he joins us from Kingston, Ontario.
Good morning.
Okay, so walk us through, in simple terms, if you can, the new regulatory framework.
Sure. So it is a cap and trade framework, and we've used cap and trade very successfully in the past to deal with things like acid rain. There are cap and trade systems for carbon emissions that are in place in places like Quebec. The way that a cap and trade system works is the government sets a cap, and in this case, we know what the ultimate cap is. It will be 35 to 38% below 2019 emission levels by 2030 for the oil and gas sector. That's a bit of a mouthful, but it represents, roughly a third below where they are right now. That'll be their cap, and then every individual producer, company, or facility will be given an allowance underneath that cap, so they can emit up to a certain number, and if they go above, they either have to buy credits from another facility, another company that may have done better, and kept underneath their cap, or in this case, they can pay into what's being called a decarbonization fund. That way they can sort of get their emissions down. So they have to bring their emissions down, or they have to pay for any emissions that go over these caps.
So Warren, what's your take on the numbers and the amounts they're saying, the measure really, and how ambitious this plan is?
So on one hand, it's not as ambitious as it could be, because they were talking about a higher or lower cap, I guess is the better way to put it, a 42% reduction rather than the 35 to 38%. There is the ability for the industry to grow a little bit, to increase production by up to 12%. There is this decarbonization fund, which is a little bit of a loophole, a way for companies to sort of buy their way out. But on the other hand, it's very ambitious because we are talking about reducing sector emissions by a little bit over a third in the course of about 5 years, which is very, very ambitious, very aggressive, and hard to see how industry will respond.
So Warren, we know going into this, Alberta did not like this plan. How does this plan impact Alberta in the short and maybe even longer term?
Well, Alberta is the province that is the most heavily invested in oil and gas production, but of course, others like Saskatchewan and Newfoundland and Labrador have big investments there. And what will happen is that companies will either have to spend money to bring their emissions down. It may be investing in technologies. It may be, mothballing some facilities that are not as efficient as they could be. Or they will have to spend money to buy credits in order to be able to be compliant with the rules. Either way, it's going to impact profits. It's going to impact provincial royalties, very likely, and that will impact provincial economies. And so Alberta is likely in the short term to really feel the pinch as the industry responds. And in the long term, the growth prospects for the industry will be much more limited. So, it does mean really a rethink of a provincial economy, and that's why I think Alberta particularly is concerned about the impact.
So how do the feds sell this to Canadians exactly?
Well, I think the way that they sell it to Canadians is to point out that oil and gas production is more than a quarter of our national emissions profile. So roughly 28% of our emissions come from oil and gas production, not the use of the material, just the production. And if we really want to bring down national emissions, if we want to meet our goals and address global warming, we've got to address those emissions. Arguably, we're coming at it late. This is something that should have happened earlier. But if the sector doesn't reduce their emissions, then the onus is shifted back to Canadians, and regular Canadians have to do more. That's, I think, how you sell it. The sector has to be part of the solution.
Warren, going forward, what do you see are the next steps for the federal Liberals to implement this before the next federal election even?
Well, the really big thing is to get the regulations worked out. So we have the broad strokes of the framework, but we need to actually have the rules. We need to know how the allocations of credits will work. We need to know, what this decarbonization fund will do and how it will function. And we need to know the sort of annual targets, where the cap will be year to year. All of these things need to be put in place. And, as you say, there could be an election relatively soon.
Right.
And there will be people who will be talking about not doing this after that election. So if the Liberals want this to happen, all of those rules need to be put in place, and the framework needs to be implemented quickly.
Warren, thank you for your thoughts on this. Great to have you on the show again, as always.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good one.
Yep, you too.
Warren Mabey is the director of Queen's University Institute for Energy and Environmental Policy.
Frequencies with Errol Nazareth.
The world is alive with sound, whether across the street or across the pond, from back home or in your own backyard. Every place has a sound and every person has a story. Discover songs and stories from people and communities across Canada and around the world.
Frequencies with host Errol Nazareth. Episodes available on demand on the CBC Listen app.
It is 6:22, 22 minutes past 6 o'clock. You're listening to Information Radio. It's Pat Kanuga in for Marcy Marcusa on this Friday morning. Weather's a big story today, folks, and hearing from some of our friends out and about who are listening. So Deb Bosch always keeps in touch with us from the Turtle Mountain area. She sent me a note and said, very windy here, straight out of the north, got a couple of centimeters, and it's snowing. Those tiny pellets so far, but coming down pretty good, kind of snowing sideways with the wind that's out there. So thanks, Deb. Stay warm and bundle up out in that Turtle Mountain area. Turtle Mountain is part of the region that is covered by the snowfall warning that Environment Canada put out for a good part of western Manitoba, all the way kind of from Swan River down through to the U.S. border in that southwestern corner in the parkland as well. So could see 10 to 15 centimeters of snow. If you want to let us know what's happening in your neighborhood, in your part of the province, you can always give Abby a call on the traffic line, 788-3093, or give us a call on the listener line, and we might play your comments throughout the show here. So that number is 788-3205. Up next on the show, imagine it's a sweltering afternoon in July. You might want to imagine that this afternoon. And you're in a snowsuit, and you have to pretend like you're brimming with Christmas cheer on a chilly December day. Welcome to being a Winnipeg actor. This year alone, at least 8 newly released Christmas movies were filmed here in Winnipeg. And we have 2 local actors who appear on some of those movies here in our airwaves right away. Zoe Fish is 12 years old. She played some pretty big roles in her career so far, like Scary Girl in The Grudge. She also acted alongside Christopher Walken in Percy. But most recently, she plays Erica in the new film A Dash of Christmas. And John B. Lowe has been in 21 Christmas movies in his career, most recently the Jingle Bell Jubilee Holiday Hotline and The Holiday Shift, which was filmed at Portage Place. They both spoke with CBC's Brittany Greenslade yesterday on Up to Speed.
Well, you know what? You guys are familiar to me because I love my made-for-TV holiday movies, so I'm so thrilled to have you here. So, Zoe, first off, tell us a little bit about your role in this recent film, A Dash of Christmas.
So I play a young girl named Erica, who's the female love interest's niece, and she's trying to set her aunt up with like this dreamy, like heartthrob kind of like local baker who has a YouTube channel and runs his own bakery. And she just really wants her aunt to be happy, and she wants her to find love. Yeah.
It's classic. I've seen ones like that, right? You got to set the aunt up.
Yeah.
So how many of these movies have you been in so far?
I think maybe like 6 or 7. I think most of my career has been Hallmark.
I like this. 12 years old, most of my career. That's great. Well, so we mentioned having to be in a snowsuit and it being July and having to act like it's really cold outside. I feel like that's got to be tough. How do you do that when it's like 30 degrees outside?
Well, yeah, it's really hot. And basically, when you have like a jacket and mitts and a hat on and 5 layers, it's basically between takes, they wrap you up, before the take, and once they yell cut, they take it all off and do it again until we're done the scene. And they have water nearby. For example, like once I was on a movie called The Christmas Club, and we were filming in like mid-July, and it was like 30 degrees outside, and it was a whole day outside, and it was so hot. Like we had to, in between like scenes, we had to go into like a air-conditioned van
just to cool down.
Yeah.
Probably I'd be sneaking popsicles on the side or a Slurpee or something like that.
Yeah.
John, I feel like you've got to have done this, so many times in that hot weather.
Yeah, I think after a while I actually often just keep the darn thing on because you take it off and put it on, you're sweating. But, you do have these great wardrobe people on crew, and so, it's really easy to hand something off. And it's the little electric fans they give you, those little battery operated fans, and lots of water. But the alternate is doing an outdoor scene in January.
Yes.
So
have you done a few of those ones too?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing about these Christmas movies that I enjoy is no one is going to ask you to, jump in the Red River at 2:00 in the morning in a January night. You're always going to be taken care of. So the biggest complaint is wearing warm clothes on a warm day.
We got to thank the crew. We got great crews here in Manitoba.
Great. Yeah, we have some. I think that's one of the reasons I think so many of these shows are shooting up here. We've got great crews, everybody from all the IATSE 856 and 669 and the DGC people and ACTRA, all of the actors here as well. I think the crews come up, they shoot one, and they go, okay, well, this will, we'll be up in Winnipeg, and it'll be tough, but we're saving some money. And then they get up here, and we've got all these really great people, and so they come back and they bring fewer and fewer people with them because we've got them all here, and it's really great.
Or you want to maybe film it in December, and it ends up being 7 degrees outside.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I know this is radio, so people can't see you, but John, you have a nice white beard.
Well, that's because I'm old.
Have you ever played Santa?
This keeps coming up. I have played Santa, but twice.
Only twice?
I've played characters who dress like Santa, and I've played one or two characters like named Chris or Nick that may be Santa.
Oh, okay.
But I've actually only played maybe 3 times. I did a holiday episode of a TV show I did as Santa. So I've played Santa 3 times in those 23 times. Most of the time it's
Are
Grandpa.
you available to play Santa?
At a fee, for sure. I never did.
So, John, because you've been doing this for a little while, do you have any advice for Zoe as she continues on her career at the ripe old age of 12?
Sure. Well, clearly she needs none of my advice. So my first advice is don't listen to old men. I think my only advice, and you already do this, is be kind. Show up on time, do the work, and be kind. And you're already hitting all those marks, so you're going to be fine.
I think that's just great advice for anybody going to work.
Yeah, I think so.
And Zoe, because you got to break into this at a young age, do you have any advice for anybody your age, a little bit younger, that wants to kind of jump into this as well?
I would just say if you have a dream, just never give up on it and just keep pushing. Like, especially if you're getting into acting, if you get an audition and you don't get the role, like, it's not the end of the world. You're probably going to have many, many auditions in the future, and just because you don't get a role, it doesn't mean that you weren't great. It has to do with looks, and it has to do with maybe personality or just what they're looking for. And so, like, sometimes I get really upset, especially if I'm, like, shortlisted for something or I get a call back. I get really upset that I don't get the role, but then I just think to myself, like, it's not that big of a deal that I don't get the role, and there will be many more opportunities for me in the future, and that I should just keep doing what I love.
That's Zoe Fish and John B. Lowen. They are both actors here in Winnipeg who've appeared in a ton of those Christmas movies that you'll be binging on over the next few weeks. We're coming up to local news at 6:30. Just want to let you know what's coming up in the next half hour of the show. It's a bar minus the part you probably associate most with it, alcohol, at around 17 minutes before 7 o'clock to be exact. We're going to hear from CBC's Jason Osler explaining why more booze-free bars are opening in Canada and around the world. So that is coming up, as well as a new report about loneliness here in Canada. Time right now is 6:30.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. Clouds are starting to move into our sky. It is 1 degree in downtown Winnipeg. Expect some rain turning into wet snow this afternoon, 5 to 10 centimeters. A high today of 1. It's going to get windy as well, but we do not have a snowfall warning for the city of Winnipeg. However, southwest Manitoba, western Manitoba, parts of the Interlake and parts of central Manitoba are under a snowfall warning this morning. Anywhere between 10 and 15 centimeters of wet, heavy snow is expected. A Winnipeg woman is demanding accountability, alleging a police officer fatally shot an unarmed man without warning last week. CBC reporter Rosanna Hempel brings us her story.
Carrie Bladen is replaying Dustin Hatcher's death in her mind over and over since her 39-year-old partner was shot by police last week. Her voice is still hoarse from screaming that night.
Dustin was shot for nothing. I just want to clear his name.
Winnipeg police say the shooting happened near Dalhousie Drive and Pembina Highway around 12:40 a.m. on November 28th after an officer was pinned by a vehicle that was attempting to flee a traffic stop. But Bladen alleges police didn't give them a reason to get out of the truck and that an officer wasn't pinned by the vehicle. She says Hatcher was shot before hitting the gas and smashing into a nearby fence.
He's only 39 and he deserved to die. I think that's 3 shots.
Winnipeg police deferred commenting to Manitoba's independent investigation unit. They also didn't provide a comment as the case is under investigation. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Manitoba Public Insurance is suing Ford Motor Company of Canada over a vehicle fire the MPI claims was related to the block heater. That fire involved a Ford Escape parked with its block heater plugged in at a business in Winnipeg. The lawsuit alleges the fire was caused by the defects in the design or manufacturing of the 2014 Ford Escape or its block heater. The lawsuit seeks nearly $16,000 for the loss of the vehicle and other costs. That fire happened in November of 2021, but the lawsuit was filed last month. Ford has not yet filed a statement of defense in court. A company spokesperson has declined comment. A holdover from the pandemic is fast becoming a Winnipeg holiday tradition.
Happy Hanukkah.
Rabbi Baruch Heidingsfeld first put a giant menorah on the back of a truck in 2020. It was a way to help people celebrate Hanukkah safely during the days of social distancing. He and his family are back on the streets again this year to spread joy and light throughout the 8-day festival.
The menorah is traditionally lit at night, and we go around the streets of Winnipeg in the evening, going around the residential areas, getting a lot of positive feedback from that as we spread the message of Hanukkah. That message, be able to have a little bit of light, can dispel a lot of darkness.
Heidingsfeld hopes his mobile menorah can help dispel the darkness of the Israel-Hamas conflict. This morning in the occupied West Bank, Israeli soldiers firing stun grenades after an incursion into downtown Ramallah. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Health Ministry says Israeli forces killed 5 Palestinians during a raid near the town of Tubas. The Israeli military is checking into that report. Violence has ramped up in the West Bank since the Israel-Hamas war started on October 7th. The COP28 climate summit is entering its final and perhaps most difficult phase. It's the negotiations on a final declaration, and conference president Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber is issuing a challenge to the delegates on hand.
I need you to step up, and I need you to come out of your comfort zones.
The key issue is fossil fuels. It's believed at least 80 of the conference's 200 countries are demanding the final declaration include a clear end date for fossil fuel production. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. We'll make that 3 wins in a row for the Winnipeg Jets.
Ehlers, pass to Connor, turns and shoots, and he scores! What a setup by Ehlers, what a
finish by Connor.
Kyle Connor in the second period on TSN as the Jets double Colorado 4-2. Kyle Connor scored twice with singles by Josh Morrissey and Adam Lowry. Connor Hellebuck with 32 saves. Jets head coach Rick Bowness.
That was a great effort. It really was. From our penalty killers did a huge job for us in the third period. When we needed the big save from Helly, we got it. But Mark's line is playing fantastic. Adam's line did a great job. Our fourth line did a fantastic job.
The Jets are now in third spot in the Central Division behind the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars. Winnipeg next plays Sunday in Anaheim. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
So Heather, I think the Jets are 7-3 in their last 10 because they had the 4-game winning streak, then the 3-game losing streak, and now they're on another 3-game winning streak, right?
Yeah, they're looking good. If they can keep this rolling.
Because last year we were doing really well at this time too. So I don't think they'll have the collapse early in next year as they did last year. I think it's a different team this year, and it's exciting going into the new year and seeing how they're doing. So thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right, so you heard that's Heather Wells, by the way, with the CBC Local News. It's Pat Kanuga here in for Marcy. Good morning, everyone watching on YouTube, on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel this morning, or on the main network if you're out at the refit center on the treadmills. Good morning to you, because I know they have us on there. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get to business in just a second, but a lot of weather to tell you about here. There are snowfall warnings, as you heard Heather mention, for southern Manitoba, mostly southwestern Manitoba. So this extends basically from Swan River to the north through the Parkland region down to Melita and Boissevain area, Turtle Mountain. Could see 10 to 15 centimeters from a low pressure system that's bringing this to southwestern and central Manitoba. We're seeing this up around Lake Winnipeg and Lake Manitoba as well right now, looking at satellite imagery. And right now we're hanging around the freezing mark in a lot of locations, so it could be that wet, heavy snow. And we're going to see really strong winds today as well, gusting 60 or 70 kilometers per hour as well from the west. So it's going to be very blustery out there. So do take it easy out there if you're out and about on the roads. There's also a snowfall warning I'll just mention for Island Lake, Oxford House, and God's Lake. That is a different system that is up north there. Here in Winnipeg right now, we are at 1, and we're going to just hover around that all day, and that wet snow should start by this afternoon here in Winnipeg. John Sauter, meteorologist here at CBC Manitoba, says we have the potential for 5 to 10 centimeters late into tonight and into tomorrow morning. So we're going to be very blustery here in the city of Winnipeg as well. It might be a nasty commute on the way home, a very wet and messy one. We'll wake up tomorrow morning to a -7. You might have to do a little bit of shoveling, and then we'll get to a -5 tomorrow. Again, still no deep freeze, folks. Sunday a -6. All next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we have a -2, a -7, a -1, and then way off in the distance, a week from now, next Thursday, a 3. So again, no -20s for daytime highs. Sunrise is 8:12, sunset is 4:28. I will mention Winnipeg's forecast. Brandon here, 0 right now with some light snow, and again, Brandon is involved in that snowfall warning. Temperature will fall to -2 this afternoon, gusty winds to 70, and then that snow will end this evening. Tomorrow, Brandon's going to wake up to a -8, and tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud and a high of -4. And Thompson, you're -10. Cloudy and -7 today is all you get, and mainly cloudy, low of -13 tonight. Tomorrow, mainly cloudy and a high of -9. A couple of quick temps for you. There is light snow in Dauphin right now, 0 on the way to a -1 this afternoon. Gimli is 2. You'll hover around that 1 degree mark today, and Morden Winkler is 1 on the way to a +2. Melita, where you have that snow falling right now, 0. That is where you will stay. It is 6:38. Thank you for listening to Information Radio. It's Pat in for Marcy. Let's take a look at business now. Krista Lee Ramlakan is here with the business report. Good morning, Krista Lee.
Good morning, Pat.
So the Bank of Canada is commenting on how immigration is affecting inflation in this country. What did it say about that?
Yeah, so Deputy Governor Tony Gravel was in Windsor yesterday for a speech, and he said mass immigration will keep a lid on inflationary pressures in the long run. But it has also strained markets, housing markets, and helped to drive rent inflation to a 40-year high. So he says a record influx of newcomers has added workers to tight labor markets where they were needed, and significantly improve the country's potential growth. But after immigration began ramping up in 2015, Canada's vacancy rate started to fall. Now, this speech came a day after the central bank decided to keep the key interest rate steady at 5%. And he said the bank is still closely watching wage growth and corporate pricing behavior, and it is prepared to raise the policy interest rate further if needed.
It's still pretty clear that we're not on a sustainable path to 2% yet.
But we see the economy slowing. We're starting to see some good news in that respect. We assess that we no longer see any excess demand, and that should be reducing inflationary pressures going forward.
Now, Gravel said since the start of last year, strong immigration has boosted the level of potential output by 2 to 3%, without adding much to inflation. So the bank estimates the increase to consumer spending from the recent increase in newcomers added just less than 0.1 percentage points to inflation, so not very much. But he said construction hasn't been able to keep up with demand, and that has had consequences for the price of homes. Shelter inflation rose just over 6% in October.
Next story, Crystal Lee, CIBC is being fined $1.3 million. Why is that? What did it do?
Yes, well, Canada's Financial Intelligence Agency says it's for non-compliance with money laundering and terrorist financing measures.
Wow.
So FINTRAC, yeah, exactly. So, FINTRAC has also recently fined RBC $7.4 million for the same thing. So CIBC isn't the only one in this. Now, the agency says CIBC's penalty is for failing to submit a suspicious transaction report when there were grounds to suspect it was related to money laundering or terrorist activity, and for not reporting information related to large money transfers from outside of Canada. Now, FINTRAC, it tries to pinpoint money linked to illicit activities by sifting through millions of pieces of information from banks and businesses every year. And it says it found an instance where CIBC didn't file a suspicious transaction report, even as it knew the client had been arrested and charged with criminal offenses. So the agency also found over 1,000 instances out of a sample of 20,000 where information related to money transfers was incomplete as well. So CIBC says, though, these matters are related to a relatively small number of transactions, and the bank will continue to identify, investigate, and do its part to deter and detect financial crime.
And moving on, a new report says flight safety in Canada is plummeting, which isn't a great word when you're talking about flights. What can you tell us about that?
Yes. So Canada has received a C grade on flight safety oversight, down from an A+ almost 2 decades ago. And that's according to a draft report from a United Nations agency. So this audit from the International Civil Aviation Organization says there are 3 areas of safety oversight seeing a big drop. So aircraft operations, airports, and air navigation. And the UN body recommends that the federal government establish a system to lock in full regulatory compliance by airlines and airports, shore up certification related to dangerous goods, and ensure proper training and fatigue management for air traffic controllers. So experts say a shortage of air traffic controllers and a trend to offloading safety responsibilities from government to industry are concerning across the continent. Now, in September, 2 Air Canada planes brushed each other on the ground at the Vancouver airport, tearing off parts. Also in March, an air traffic controller cleared a plane for takeoff in Florida. This was an Air Rouge flight. And that was just as another jet made its final approach on the same runway. So the pilot had to pull up and get out of the way. But, Pat, however, the Canadian government says the report is not a measure of the country's safety performance and that it did not note any issues requiring immediate action. Also, aviation experts say Canada's flight safety record speaks for itself. Plane accident deaths are down in recent years, and there's been no major commercial airline crashes in decades.
Okay, that's the bright part of that story. Thanks, Crystal Lee. So leave us with what's happening in markets right now at 6:44 in the morning.
So in Europe, markets are slightly up as traders around the world look ahead to key November jobs report coming out of the U.S. today. Germany, the U.K., and France are all up. In Asia, markets are mixed as Japan's third quarter GDP has revised downward, and India's central bank held its benchmark rate steady. So Japan is down, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is down, Oil is up $1.28 to $70.61 U.S. per barrel. Gold is down 60 cents to $2,045.60 U.S. per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.13 of a cent to 73.66 cents U.S.
Thanks very much, Krista Lee.
All right. Thanks, Pat.
Emily Brass will be sitting in for me next week, and Marcy, so we will speak with you from behind the glass next week.
Okay. Sounds good.
That's Krista Lee Ramlakan with the business news. We are at 6:45, 15 minutes before 7 o'clock. You're listening to Information Radio. It's Pat in for Marcy. Thank you for joining us this morning and making us a part of your morning routine. It is 1 on the outside. The wet snow is on the way for Winnipeg later in the day, and we have that snowfall warning for the southwestern half of the province. Could see 10 to 15 centimeters. We'll be telling you about that all morning because that is the big story in weather. Up next on the show, we think of bars as places to socialize, dance, and, of course, possibly imbibe. Now more businesses are opening that offer that with a twist. None of the drinks have any booze in them. CBC's Jason Osler explains why.
Raquel Foran and her husband just opened a new business in Port Coquitlam, BC.
We are the owners of Bevy's Booze-Free Bottle Shop and Beverage Room.
The name says it all, a place to gather and have drinks without alcohol. It's a mouthful, so Foran says it's simplest to just call it Bevy's, but she deliberately decided not to include the word bar.
There's a lot of negative connotation behind bars. For people who don't drink or are trying to get away from that or choosing a sober lifestyle, it's almost triggering for them.
Bevy's has hundreds of non-alcoholic wines, beers, cocktails, and anything else you can think of. And Foran says customers come in with low expectations.
Everyone starts out very skeptical, but we've won over everybody.
That's in large part because the non-alcoholic drink sector is exploding and options are improving. In fact, Foran says the inspiration for the business came to her last spring.
The idea for doing this came from us reading a news article about how the non-alcoholic industry was growing. And we were quite intrigued by that.
And others are intrigued too, like Alex Viol, who's opening a similar place called SoBar in Kelowna. He told CBC he's confident he can succeed because the alcohol-free bar is catching on.
You just have to look across different places in Toronto, across the States as well, and other parts of the world. In Europe, there's loads of these places. So it is a trend that's been happening, and we believe Kelowna is the perfect spot for it.
For Gail Lynch, who's the owner of an alcohol-free spot called Zero Cocktail Bar in Toronto, it's all about catering to what younger people are looking for today. She explained to CBC.
They are not consuming alcohol the way that those of my generation and before were consuming alcohol. When I started doing this, I maybe found 3 products in the market. Now they're over 200 plus. That's just the Canadian market.
The options are improving, but Raquel Foran says opening a business like this still faces a huge hurdle.
I think what we're up against is this ingrained attitude in society that you have to have alcohol to celebrate.
Tim Namey agrees. He's director of the Canadian Institute for Substance Use Research and says people who want to socialize at a bar and not have alcohol often have to account for themselves.
And if they're not drinking, they feel a bit socially outcasted or they feel the need to explain themselves. So I think this is part of a movement that is saying, being a non-drinker or not drinking alcohol in that moment is totally normal and, in fact, should be celebrated in some ways.
What Namey says should also be celebrated is the cumulative effect of people seeing businesses like these open. It signals a normalization of something new.
These kind of social cues are very important. Canadian culture, the dominant sort of cultural paradigm is that everybody drinks. I mean, statistically, there's no question that the vast majority of Canadian adults drink, but we should also remember that there's a substantial minority of folks that don't.
And unlike Bevy's, which doesn't include the word bar, Namey says he's actually glad many of these new establishments are using the word.
The term bar does connote sort of intense sort of socializing, maybe meeting new people. It's also getting across the message is that having fun, even if it's celebrating, even if it's intense socializing, doesn't need to involve alcohol. And for some people, it's the expectation is that it'll be better without alcohol.
That's the hope for Raquel Foran, who says her mind is wide open to make her business succeed.
We've opened our doors and see how it goes, and we'll follow the trends, we'll follow the crowd.
Foran says she'd love to open many more locations if the alcohol-free bar trend continues to grow. For CBC Radio, I'm Jason Osler.
She's daring, she's critical, and ultimately hopeful. Writer and filmmaker Astra Taylor explores our shared sense of insecurity and anxiety and proposes a new path forward. Hi, I'm Nala Ayed. Join me all this week as Ideas presents the 2023 CBC Massey Lectures, The Age of Insecurity, coming together as things fall apart.
Ideas, weeknights at 8, 8:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
6:50 in the morning, you're listening to Information Radio, and I want to let people know, of course, about our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. We're on there live there right now. Good morning, everyone. Shelley from Camp Morton wrote in the chat, and she said, good morning, and it's hashtag bikini weather, I guess, in her part of the world, up in the Interlake there near Gimli. Gimli and a lot of other places are going to be seeing some wet snow as we continue on throughout the day here with those snowfall warnings for the western part of the province, and we're going to see some wet snow here today and some really gusty winds. So know that your commute this afternoon could be a little bit messy. We expect to see wind gusts 40 to 60 this afternoon and evening. And again, the snow that we're going to get, a lot of it will melt because we're hovering around a 1 today and then a 0. But the ground is still pretty warm, especially after the last couple of days. I was driving home yesterday at 2 in the afternoon, and the thermometer, or the temperature in my car said it was 8 degrees outside, which was a little bit warmer than the forecast high of 5. Up next on the show, recently the World Health Organization said that loneliness could become a global epidemic very soon. Here in Canada, a new report released this week highlights the problem in this country. The report, called Understanding the Factors Driving the Epidemic of Social Isolation and Loneliness Among Older Canadians. From the National Institute on Aging, it looks at people over the age of 50. Now, among this group of over 50s, the report says 58% of them have feelings of loneliness. And one of the authors is Dr. Samir Sinha. He is the Director of Geriatrics at Sinai Health and the University Health Network in Toronto, and the Director of Health Policy Research at the National Institute on Aging at Toronto Metropolitan University. Good morning, Dr. Sinha.
Good morning, Pat.
Always nice to have a former Winnipegger on our airwaves.
Happy to be here.
What, in your view, are the headlines coming out of this report?
Yeah, so the headlines really are that social isolation and loneliness are really important and significant issues because just of how evident they are in our society. So again, 41% of folks 50 and older report experiencing social isolation, and 58% experiencing some forms of loneliness. And why is it serious? Because loneliness itself is seen as equivalent to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day, and it can have significant health consequences for people of all ages, but especially for older adults.
So, Dr. Sinha, help us understand the factors that lead to isolation among this older population.
Yeah, so as we get older, we're more likely to experience different life transitions. So, for example, we might be retiring from full-time work. We might start losing family members and friends. We might start experiencing health conditions that might limit our ability to get around more easily throughout our communities. And we know that people tend to outlive their decision to stop driving by about a decade. So all these little things can add up to ways that can inadvertently start isolating us more from the rest of our family and friends and our society, and that can trigger an increasing risk for experiencing loneliness as well.
So this is mental health that I'm thinking because of the aspects and the loneliness and the feelings, but how does it translate into people's health physically?
Yeah, so again, it's those mental health concerns that can often lead to increased physical stress as well. And so that stress, if you're quite stressed from a mental health perspective, for example, then that can also lead to increased risks of heart disease and other chronic conditions. And altogether, this is why we've seen a shorter life expectancy and even an increased risk of dementia for people experiencing these things, because even just the idea of getting together with other people, it stimulates our brains. And so those are some of the things that we think are why we're seeing higher rates of dementia in people who experience social isolation and loneliness.
So when you see the group of older gentlemen sitting at the Tim Hortons talking politics and sports, that's a very healthy thing then, I guess.
It's a really healthy thing because it's not only the idea of engaging your brains, for example, but we know even just the physical presence of being amongst other people, it can release, various hormones and other things that, kind of help us stay happy and engaged, even if you don't agree with your friends' politics or choice of sports. It's just being together with other people. It means that you care about other people care about you, and it's a way of just staying stimulated and engaged.
Now, there's been a focus on the connection between health and social isolation recently globally. The World Health Organization recently made loneliness a global health priority. What has been done here in Canada to address this issue, Dr. Sinha?
So we haven't really taken this seriously at a national level in Canada the way that, for example, the U.S. Surgeon General just announced this as a major public health emergency in the U.S. and starting to work on developing a strategy. So countries like the United Kingdom, Japan, Australia, New Zealand have all created national strategies and national initiatives, and even the UK and Japan have actually appointed ministers responsible for loneliness. So we don't have a national strategy in Canada. Our National Institute on Aging is calling for one, and one that just raises awareness like we're doing today about the issue, tries to fight the stigma because this can happen to anybody, especially when the majority of older Canadians are experiencing loneliness, and then giving practical recommendations about what we can do as individuals and as communities to better prevent this. So we're not doing things at a national level, but there's a new Manitoba senior strategy that was recently released, right, and there's a lot there about helping people stay more connected and making that a focus of what we should be doing.
So the holiday season has started. What should we keep in mind during this period about how isolation can impact people in our community, Doctor?
Yeah, holidays are really challenging times because it can bring out more feelings of loneliness and more isolation. And so I think it's an opportunity for people who might be experiencing this to start thinking about what are ways in which I can be more proactive in getting engaged with others over the holidays, reaching out, saying, hey, I want to get together, how do we do this? But also reminding us that you probably have people in your lives who may not be engaging as much because maybe they're just embarrassed to ask for a ride to a family gathering, so they just rather not be a burden and just stay home. But it's an opportunity for us to kind of start thinking about people in our lives who might be experiencing some of these risk factors, reaching out, maybe just making a phone call, maybe just, in between, holiday shopping, stop by, have a cup of tea, letting people know you care, and figuring out, are there little barriers, that might actually be restricting that person from feeling comfortable about getting out and about and staying connected and staying engaged. All these little things build stronger communities and really have a lasting impact.
Lots to think about there, Dr. Sinha. Thanks for your time.
Well, thanks for having me, Pat.
Take care.
Take care.
Dr. Samir Sinha is Director of Geriatrics at the Sinai Health and University Network. He's also Director of Health Policy Research at the National Institute on Aging and one of the authors of the study. We're coming up to 2.5 minutes before 7 o'clock. Let's go out to the CBC News Center and see what's making news headlines. Here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, MPI is suing Ford Motor Company of Canada over a vehicle fire the insurer claims was related to a block heater. That fire involved a Ford Escape parked with its block heater plugged in at a business in Winnipeg in 2021. In the lawsuit alleging the fire was caused by defects in the design or manufacturing of the vehicle or the block heater. So we'll hear more coming up. And as Jewish Winnipeggers mark Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, a rabbi hopes his mobile menorah can help dispel the darkness of the Israel-Hamas conflict. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather Wells. So you heard Heather talk about that block heater story. We're going to be speaking with someone from the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service at 10 to 8 about block heater fires and how they can start. So that is coming up in the next hour. As well, this story, which I find super interesting. Ready for this? We're going to speak with a man about his skills for cracking safes. That's at 20 to 8. He's going to tell us about some of the safes he's broken into legally and what he discovered inside as well. And in the next half hour of the show, well, they started with the Winnipeg Boys Choir in the 1940s, and now they have returned to sing once again. We'll meet some of the alumni singers who are hoping to be part of the choir's centennial celebrations. That is at 7:15. Lots coming up on this Friday show. Thank you for being with us. Folks on the main network, we'll say goodbye to you. You can check us out on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page now because we're off on the main network. And I will mention right now, it's a pretty easy drive so far in the city of Winnipeg. It was a little bit greasy when I was coming in this morning. If you have anything to let us know about in traffic, 788-3093. Abby Adiemi is standing by to take your calls. And again, the snowfall warning for southwestern Manitoba. World Report is coming up next.
Today on The Current.
How much is that dog in the window?
There is something unique about the love of a dog, and a drug newly approved in the U.S. can make that love last a little longer by giving your pup an extra year of life. But some dog lovers are asking if that's really best for up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm John Northcott. CBC News has learned a group of Canadian Muslims is leaving the federal Liberal Party's top donor ranks. It's called the Network 100, and its members say they are frustrated by the Prime Minister's refusal to call for a permanent ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Rafi Boudjikanian reports.
Thank you, my friends. When Justin Trudeau surged to his first victory in 2015, Mohamed Abulkasim was rooting for him.
We believed the promises Justin Trudeau was marketing.
And that support was not just at the ballot box. Abulkasim was among Canadian Muslims who organized to form a group called the Network 100. They brought together not just campaign volunteers for the Liberals, but donations. They say they have collectively contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to the federal Liberals since then. But that's all changing. Abulkasim says his group has taken issue with what they believe is a soft stance by the party's leadership on the number of Palestinians killed by the Israeli military's bombings against Hamas. Though Trudeau has criticized Israel in recent weeks,
I urge the government of Israel to exercise maximum restraint.
He has not called for a permanent ceasefire. After waiting close to 2 months, the network has written to the Liberal Party president, informing him they are leaving the Laurier Club in protest. That's a donor club where the Liberals expect at least $1,700 a year in individual contributions.
We cannot sleep at night. You sleep and you get up. There's at least 50 Palestinians getting killed.
Asked about the network halting future donations, the Liberal Party said in a statement, Canadians choose to donate to political parties for a variety of reasons, including to support a specific cause or policy position. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
The UN Security Council is considering whether to call for an immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. It's something Secretary General Antonio Guterres is pressuring the group to do. The vote is later today, and as Abby Kugadasan reports, it comes amid growing humanitarian concerns.
In perhaps his strongest public message yet, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken highlighted Washington's stance on Israel's bombardment of Gaza.
There does remain a gap between the intent to protect civilians and the actual results that we're seeing on the ground.
Israel says it has taken steps to minimize civilian casualties. The Hamas-run health ministry says more than 17,000 people have been killed in this war. Blinken said he spoke with British Foreign Secretary David Cameron about the future of Gaza once the military operation ends. But right now, the IDF is conducting intense ground and air operations in the heavily crowded south. Tens of thousands of Palestinians who headed south are moving again, fleeing into Rafah near the border with Egypt. Israel says in the next few days, it will allow the Karam Shalom crossing to be used for inspecting aid before it enters Gaza via the Rafah border. The United Nations Relief Chief Martin Griffiths had called for it to open. He also lamented his own agency's ability to help Palestinians.
We do not have a humanitarian operation in southern Gaza that can be called by that name anymore.
For those who might be able to leave, the decision is still difficult. Mohammed Halahini usually lives in England, but is with his family in Han Yunis.
If things carry on as they are, I do not see a future for myself or my family in this land.
Abby Kugadasan, CBC News, London.
Russian leader Vladimir Putin has announced he will run for another term as president. Putin has held positions of power in Russia for about 25 years. Next year's election would keep him in power until 2030. Russia's most famous opposition politician, Alexei Navalny, is currently imprisoned. He says the election will be rigged. Voting will take place in occupied parts of Ukraine as well, which Russia considers its new territories. In the U.S., federal prosecutors have filed a new case against Hunter Biden. A special counsel took over investigating the president's son after a previous plea deal fell apart. The CBC's Richard Madden joins us from our Washington bureau with details. Richard, what are the charges against Hunter Biden?
Yeah, a federal grand jury returned 9 charges against Hunter Biden, including failure to pay at least $1.4 million in taxes and filing false tax returns between 2016 to 2019. Now, they accuse Hunter Biden of filing false tax deductions through a company he owned to, quote, fund his extravagant lifestyle. And according to charging documents, he reportedly used the cash to pay for drugs, strippers, and exotic cars. Now, Biden's lawyers are reportedly outraged, saying if his last name was anything other than Biden, the charges wouldn't have been brought. He could face up to 17 years in prison, and this comes against the backdrop of the presidential 2024 election, where President Joe Biden is facing former President Donald Trump, who's facing several indictments of his own.
Richard, what happens next?
Yeah, well, the White House has yet to respond, and President Joe Biden is heading to California today for previously scheduled fundraising events. But ultimately, this will add fuel to the House Republicans' push to formally authorize an impeachment inquiry against the president. Speaker Mike Johnson saying earlier this week he plans to formalize it with a vote to give investigators more power.
This vote is not a vote to impeach President Biden. This is a vote to continue the inquiry of impeachment, and that's a necessary constitutional step.
So this indictment against Hunter Biden doesn't appear to refer to his father in his current role as president or previous role as vice president, but all this sets the stage for a vicious, politically charged election season ahead.
Richard Madden in Washington. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
In Quebec, over 400,000 public sector workers are back on the picket lines. A group of unions known as the Common Front are on a new 7-day walkout after rejecting the government's latest contract offer on Wednesday. The unions say the proposed wage increases still fail to keep up with inflation. Mark Tanguay is the interim leader of the Liberal opposition. He says the government's negotiating strategy isn't working.
It's a total failure, and the government must accelerate, must reach a deal quickly, and Premier Legault needs to be involved.
Quebec's teachers' union also headed to its 3rd week on the picket lines. That means public schools across the province remain closed. The new Northwest Territories Premier is already laying out some priorities while inheriting social issues like addictions, a shortage of housing, and economic troubles. Premier-elect R.J. Simpson is also getting set to lead the territory after what was a record wildfire year. Juanita Taylor reports.
It's still sinking in. Feel very honored. It's a big responsibility.
R.J. Simpson says he's feeling excited to lead what he's already calling a good team after he and his cabinet got selected yesterday.
And there's a good group of regular members as well.
Simpson says the territory's consensus style of government will soon set its priorities as an assembly, but he says he wants the 20th Legislative Assembly to improve its relationships with Indigenous governments. There are 2 outstanding land claims in the Northwest Territories that for decades have been left unsettled.
The way forward for the territory is to settle and implement our land claim and self-government agreements.
Another commitment for this government is how it will respond to a review looking into how the last government handled the summer's wildfire season. That saw 2/3 of the population evacuate.
Given the magnitude of what happened, it's really going to have to be an enhanced review. The public needs to know what happened. They need to feel comforted that we are taking this seriously.
The changing climate is just one of the territory's new challenges over the next 4 years. The Diavik Diamond Mine is slated to close, meaning the loss of jobs and revenue. Premier-elect R.J. Simpson says it's time to get to work. A swearing-in ceremony will be held this morning in Yellowknife. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Rankin Inlet, Nunavut.
And finally, Rush frontman Geddy Lee has now wrapped up the North American leg of his book tour, but not before giving fans a surprise treat last night. His final stop, Toronto's Massey Hall. Lee is promoting his memoir, My Effin' Life. Who better to help him relate the memories than old friend and bandmate Alex Lifeson? There were no guitars, basses, or drum kits, just a fireside chat between two old friends and a couple of thousand fans who appeared to enjoy every second of it. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Little Tom Sawyer with your Cheerios this morning. Good morning, everyone. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1 in Manitoba. It's Pat Kanuga in for Marcy Marcusa on this Friday morning. Coming up in this hour of the show, a house fire earlier this week was likely caused by a block heater. Now coming up in a car, that is, and we'll hear more from the City Fire Paramedic Service on how to prevent these types of fires and how common they really are. That's coming up at 10 to 8. Also, you don't want to miss this. A Winnipeg transit driver will be showing off his safe cracking skills this weekend. Yes, safe cracking. He'll share how he's managed to crack into more than 100 safes and why it isn't the treasures inside that motivate him usually. Also in this half hour, they started with the Winnipeg Boys Choir in the 1940s and now they have returned to sing once again. We'll meet some of the alumni singers who are hoping to be part of the choir's centennial celebrations. That's all coming up in this hour of Information Radio. 7:11 though right now. Let's see what's making news headlines. Here is Heather Wells.
Good morning. A Winnipeg woman is challenging the police account of her partner's death after he was shot and killed by an officer last week. Carrie Bladen says Dustin Hatcher did not deserve to die, despite being on the run on outstanding charges she says resulted from his challenges with addictions. Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit says a 39-year-old man was shot after an officer was pinned by a vehicle trying to flee a traffic stop near Pembina and Dalhousie Drive. More than 100 people were at the Manitoba Legislative Building for an official lighting of the menorah just after sundown last night. Premier Rob Canoe lighting one of the candles. We're going to hear how celebrations of Hanukkah in Winnipeg this year are impacted by the war between Israel and Hamas. That's coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells on the news desk. It is 12 minutes after 7 o'clock, and lots to talk about in the weather this morning because of these snowfall warnings for the western part of the province. But first, we're starting to hear from some school divisions. So Rolling River School Division, because of worsening road conditions and the snowfall warning, buses are canceled today, but all schools are open. So that's Rolling River. It's the same story in Park West and Beautiful Plains. So schools are open, but buses are not running. So Rolling River, Park West, Beautiful Plains, that's what we've heard about so far. Speaking of that snowfall warning, let's get into that, and then Abby will join us with the Winnipeg forecast right away. But we have the snowfall warning for much of southwestern Manitoba. We're talking Swan River to the north part, and then through the Parkland area right down to that Melita Boissevain area, and as well the northern Interlake, Arberg, Hecla, Fisher River, Gibsonville, Ashern. So that's it's a wide swath for this snowfall warning, which could bring 10 to 15 centimeters of snow from a low pressure system, and with it some really gusty winds as well from the north. I said west last half hour. It's northerly winds, 60 to 70 kilometers per hour by a little bit later on into midday and into the afternoon. So the drive could be really messy this afternoon for you. It could be messy this morning for you as well, depending on where you are. Temperatures are hovering at zero, like around zero though. Like we're 1 right now in the city of Winnipeg, and I'm looking at temperatures later in the day, and there's nothing really cold. We have some overnight lows around -7, but a lot of 1s and 2s even in areas today. So we are 1 right now in the city of Winnipeg, and Abby's going to let us know what's happening here in the city today in Winnipeg, what we're going to see.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we're 1 in the city. It's a cloudy day. We'll be having that periods of rain beginning as people get prepared for their morning rush. Then that's going to change to snow this afternoon. And be advised, we'll be having the risk of freezing rain also happening today. According to John Sutter's forecast, today will be mainly cloudy most of the morning periods with a few wet flurries and then wet snow beginning during your lunch period, and we'll be having that potential for 5 to 10 centimeters by tonight, depending on how much melts on contact. Also, don't forget, when it snows, it's going to be windy in the late period of the day, and we'll be heading to a high of 1 today, though the wind chill will be feeling like minus 11 later in the afternoon, and that wind is actually north at 10 gusts into 15 this morning, and then towards the afternoon and the evening period, it's going to be gusting to 60 ahead in northwest. Tonight will also be cloudy with wet snow and blowing snow in open areas. We'll be expecting about 5 centimeters of that. And talking about, you mentioned school closures and road conditions. We're already getting calls from the Brandon area already.
And what are you hearing?
Actually, Kelly, who works at a hospital in Cabaret, called and said westbound Brandon to Cabaret is down to one lane that you can't really try to pass because it's really, really bad and slushy along that. It's slimy, it's slushy, and it's icy. That's according to Kelly this morning. And also Damien called from Brandon and said it's very sleek in Brandon. So you need to give yourself some extra time for your commute this morning because of the condition of the roads along that axis.
We know Damien. He's pretty slick himself.
Yeah, Damien is pretty slick himself. So if you see anything in traffic, feel free to let us know. 788-3093.
Thank you for your calls to the traffic line this morning. They are much appreciated. Up first this half hour, it's the second oldest choral ensemble in Winnipeg. The Winnipeg Boys Choir was founded nearly a century ago. For this year's holiday concert season, previous members of the choir were invited to take part in the alumni choir. CBC Manitoba community reporter Shanley Vidal was at the Crescent Fort Rouge United Church this past Tuesday, where the Treble Boys Chorus, Senior Boys Chorus, and the alumni choir were rehearsing. Shanley also learned a little bit about the history of the Winnipeg Boys Choir from Artistic Director Carolyn Boys.
We are celebrating, this is our 99th season, so we're gearing up towards big celebrations in the 100th. And we were founded by the Men's Musical Club. And yes, they founded the Winnipeg Philharmonic Choir first. I know, and I'm not sure where in the sequence, but also the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra is a result of their work and initiative, and many, many, many years later as well, the Winnipeg Girls Choir. So we're grateful that this organization started groups such as ours, and what we're doing now in this our 99th season and looking ahead to the 100th is, you know, maintaining and celebrating a lot of the best things of the tradition and the music of this long legacy, and always trying to be innovative and responsive to the boys who show up now on Tuesdays for rehearsals. May I say one thing about this exciting year? We have an alumni choir joining us for this Christmas. They joined us last Christmas as well, and we're looking for alumni to join us for the 100th season, of course. But later on today in the rehearsal will be, when the alumni join us, one of the gentlemen in the choir is 90 years old, and he joined the Winnipeg Boys Choir in the 1942-1943 season. So I mean, we're always busy on Tuesdays. We start and then everyone's putting on their coats and leaving, but I hope tonight I get to speak with him and just ask him a few more questions about like whose director was and what a typical rehearsal would have looked like, where they rehearsed. All of these stories we're looking very eagerly to gather and collect, and we're because it's a rich history that we could know even more about. And we're looking for alumni. If anyone listening is someone who sang in the boys' choir or had family or friends who did, if they would reach out to us, we'd be ever so grateful to try to celebrate with them next year as well, for sure.
Jim Shepard. I am in the alumni choir of the Winnipeg Boys. I joined the choir in 1942. I'm 90 years old this year. I was asked to first join the alumni for their 90th anniversary, which was 9 years ago, the Winnipeg Boys Choir. And I was very happy to be asked to join the Christmas choir this year. And and they'll be celebrating their 100th next year. And that'll be interesting to see if I'll be able to be there. Well, it was a great way to join with young boys at my age, 10, 12, in that age group. It was fun singing in the festival.
What's it like for you when you're seeing these boys now, practicing for their concert? What's it like for you? Does that bring back memories?
It brings back many memories of the harmony and things like that, we were very young, and that's the young boys here, very sweet voices, and also at that time there was also a girls' choir, and of course the boys were always in competition at the festival with the girls, and I think we won most of the time. But not all the time.
Well, I'm Bill Stewart. I joined the choir in 1946. I was 6 years old at the time. So Jim's got a few years on me. I'm kind of a young guy compared to him. I'm just in my 80s. Fortunately, my parents were both musical, my father particularly, although he was an accountant, was a very fine pianist. And my mother had as a very close friend a woman named Frances Christie, who was then the conductor and director of the Winnipeg Boys Choir. So that's how I got started as a wee boy soprano, and I stayed with it after my voice changed. They had a second level of the choir you could go into for about 3 years or so, and then I got involved in other things. And I didn't sing for many years until I was in my 50s, and then I got involved in choral music again. And I can't tell you how my experience with the Winnipeg Boys Choir ultimately opened up a world to me that I don't think I would ever have been able to participate in otherwise.
You're seeing these young people on stage, just like you were many years ago. Does that bring back memories?
It certainly does. And so much changes in the world all the time, and certainly has over my lifetime, the 70-some years or so since I started in the Winnipeg Boys Choir. And yet, when I look at these boys, and they don't have short pants anymore, but they have blue blazers, and they usually have a tie and a white shirt, particularly for a concert. I'll tell you, it's not much different than when I was singing in the choir.
Next year, the Winnipeg Boys Choir, they're going to be celebrating 100 years. How does that make you feel?
Well, I'll tell you, like Jim, I sang in the 90th anniversary program when they asked some alumni to come out. And then I did also last year, they had a Christmas program. So I rejoined them for that. And again this year. And, my voice is fast disappearing on me in many ways, but I hope that as a whole, and including my voice, I make it to the 100th anniversary of the choir next year.
That was CBC Manitoba community reporter Shanley Vidal with members of the Winnipeg Boys Choir alumni Jim Shepard and Bill Stewart. They will be part of the holiday show taking place on Tuesday at Crescent Fort Rouge United Church. By the way, if you're a previous member of the Winnipeg Boys Choir and would like to be part of the 100th anniversary celebration, you can go online to winnipegboyschoir.ca.
Put a little gold in your stocking this year. Comedy Gold. The Winnipeg Comedy Festival is back April 30th to May 5th, presented by the Gas Station Arts Centre, and CBC is a proud sponsor. 6 days of funny featuring international comedians and great local talent. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community and click on the link for more.
Hi, I'm Pia Chattopadhyay, your host of the Sunday Magazine. Every weekend, we help you make sense of our changing world through conversations that cut deep and mine the ideas driving society, politics, and cultures today, with plenty of music, wonder, and fun along the way. So come along and join me for the Sunday Magazine, Sunday mornings at 9:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
We are 24 minutes after 7 o'clock, just before a look at sports from National Sports Desk. I want to mention, again, a few things affecting school divisions this morning because of the expected snow and what is out there right now on the highways of western Manitoba. So buses are not running in the following divisions, but schools are open. So Rolling River School Division, Park West, and Beautiful Plains. So again, buses not running because of the snowfall warning and the road conditions that are worsening. And schools are open, though, so know that that is happening in that part of the province this morning. We do have that snowfall warning. Could see 10 to 15 centimeters of snow, which is a bit of a shock after the warm weather we've been having and the green December so far. But it's going to be that heavy, wet snow today with some really gusty winds. Could see wind gusts to 70 by this afternoon. We are 1 in the city of Winnipeg right now. And let's take a look at from the National Sports Desk, I should say. Claude Feg is here. Good morning, Claude.
Good morning. How are you?
I am well. Nice to join you. Nice of you to join us this morning. We should say Scott Regier is off today. So
yes.
Thanks for joining us on Information Radio. Let's start with the Jets. Another big night for the Jets.
No question about that, Pat. Pretty good showing by the Jets last night at home, actually in Colorado, beating the Avalanche, of course, former Stanley Cup champions. Very formidable opponent this season. They won it 4-2. And Kyle Connor, who has really become a star in the NHL, scored twice, while goalie Connor Hellebuck, who's already a star in the NHL, he made 32 saves for the victory and feels that the comeback by the Jets this season after some bumps in the road are certainly proof that this team's mindset is much different than a year ago.
You know, I think you could speculate anything, really. I like to think year by year, and this year is completely different than last year. You know, I believe in the guys in here, and, you know, it's hockey. Hockey's going to go back and forth. That's why fans come and watch. You know, that's exciting. That's why we love to play.
And, of course, the Jets will try to keep it going, but certainly, Pat, looks like things are a little rosier these days than they were certainly in the last few weeks.
Yeah, Hellebuck's really playing in fine form. I was listening to a post-game podcast driving into work at 4:30 this morning. It was a very complete game by the Jets, so I hope they keep it up. Let's go from hockey to golf, and there's an old adage, money talks, and it did for one PGA star, didn't it?
There's no question about that, Pat. You know, Jon Rahm has been one of the brightest stars on the PGA Tour, amassing 20 victories, which includes 2 majors, and that includes this year's Masters. Now, Rahm had been a staunch supporter of the PGA Tour and dismissed any thoughts of jumping to the rival Saudi Live Tour last year.
Yeah, money is great, but truth be told, I could retire right now with what I've made, and I've lived a very happy life and not play golf again. So I've never really played the game of golf for monetary reasons. I play for the love of the game, and I want to play against the best in the world.
But as we know, Pat, especially in sports, money doesn't just talk these days. It screams, come and get me. And Rahm has agreed to join the Live Tour after all. The name Live, of course, refers to the Roman numeral 54, which is the number of holes they play at any Live event. Now, safe to say Rahm will pocket much more than 54, as in millions. It's a reported deal for $300 million. Now, last night on Fox News, Rahm tried to justify his change of heart.
What I've said before is true. I do not play golf for the money. But as a husband, as a father, and as a family man, I have a duty to my family to give them the best opportunities and the most amount of resources possible. And that's where that comes in, right? Obviously, it is a factor.
Now, the Live Tour season kicks off next February in Mexico.
So I don't play for money, but it is a factor. Okay.
I think for most of us, yeah.
Let's end off with a look at some great Canadian talent that's on display this weekend, taking on the world. What is that about?
Absolutely. Always great to see Canadians competing on a world stage. Couple of examples of that this weekend. The World Figure Skating Championships taking place in Beijing. Diana Stellato-Dudek and Maxime Deschamps, both from Quebec, delivered a strong performance yesterday and sit second after the pair's short program. Now, CBC sports commentator Asher Hill, well, he weighs in on that Quebec duel.
They put up scores early in the season as Skate Canada that have not even been sniffed by any of their competitors on the circuit. Though they faltered at Cup of China, they still came away with a decisive victory, and knowing these two, they will not repeat those mistakes.
Now, Canada also has 3 ice dance teams in the competition, including defending champions Piper Gillis and Paul Poirier. CBC Sports will live stream every skate at the final in Beijing. And still on the ice, in New Brunswick, Canada's sledge hockey team is competing at the Para Hockey Cup. Canada wrapped up the round robin, losing 5-0 to the U.S., but the real games begin today as Canada faces China in one of the semifinals, while the U.S. faces the Czech Republic in the other. Pat.
Claude, nice to meet you on the radio today.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
Thanks for joining us. That's
Have
Claude.
a great day.
You too. That's Claude Feg from the National Radio Sports Desk. Still to come in the next half hour of Information Radio, we'll speak with a man about his skills for cracking safes. I have all these movie visions or scenes going through my head. At 7:40, he's going to tell us about some of the safes he's broken into here in Winnipeg and what he's discovered inside. Time right now is 7:30.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's cloudy, no precipitation yet. It's going to get windy, and we do expect some rain, becoming wet snow by afternoon, a high today of 1. And there is a snowfall warning for all of western Manitoba, southwest Manitoba, parts of the Interlake and central Manitoba. Heavy snow, blowing snow, 10 to 15 centimeters expected today. A Winnipeg woman is demanding accountability, alleging a police officer fatally shot an unarmed man without warning last week. CBC reporter Rosanna Hempel brings us her story.
Carrie Bladen is replaying Dustin Hatcher's death in her mind over and over since her 39-year-old partner was shot by police last week. Her voice is still hoarse from screaming that night.
Dustin was shot for nothing. I just want to clear his name.
Winnipeg police say the shooting happened near Dalhousie Drive and Pembina Highway around 12:40 a.m. on November 28th, after an officer was pinned by a vehicle that was attempting to flee a traffic stop. But Bladen alleges police didn't give them a reason to get out of the truck and that an officer wasn't pinned by the vehicle. She says Hatcher was shot before hitting the gas and smashing into a nearby fence.
He's only 39 and he deserved to die. I think that's 3 shots.
Winnipeg police deferred commenting to Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit. They also didn't provide a comment as the case is under investigation. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Manitoba Public Insurance is suing Ford Motor Company of Canada over a vehicle fire MPI claims was related to the block heater. That fire involved a Ford Escape parked with its block heater plugged in at a business in Winnipeg. The lawsuit alleges the fire was caused by defects in the design or manufacturing of the 2014 Ford Escape or its block heater. The lawsuit seeks nearly $16,000 for the loss of the vehicle and other costs. That fire happened in November 2021, but the lawsuit was filed last month. Ford has not yet filed a statement of defense in court. A company spokesperson has declined comment. MPIs have been up all night in a marathon voting session in the House of Commons, and the voting is still underway this morning.
Madam Speaker, I believe that if you seek it, you will find.
There is no unanimous consent on the motion.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre sparring with the Speaker. The Conservatives have put forward a long list of amendments and motions to what was already a lengthy legislative session. It's a delay tactic the party has launched as part of its opposition to the government's carbon pricing policy. As it stands now, it is possible the voting will continue all day and into tonight. The Israeli military says it has struck 450 targets in Gaza in the past 24 hours. The bombardment continues as the military says it's discovered another Hamas cell preparing to launch rockets at the Israeli Defense Forces. Meanwhile, in Washington, the Biden administration again urging Israel to do more to protect the civilian population in Gaza. Here is U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
It remains imperative that Israel put a premium on civilian protection, making sure that the communications are such that people know where they can go, when they can go there safely, making sure that the areas that they go to are fully resourced and supplied with food, medicine, water.
You can hear the latest on what's happening in the Middle East, as well as other national and international news, coming up on World Report at 8. Celebrating in a time of darkness. Hanukkah, the 8-day Festival of Lights, began in Winnipeg last night. Paula Parks is the incoming president of the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg. She says the Israel-Hamas war means a subdued mood this year, but she says the lighting of the menorah also means more.
People in the community will look forward to celebrating this Hanukkah especially. It's known as a festival of light, and I think in these times we really do have to bring forth the light.
More than 100 people were at the Manitoba Legislative Building for the official lighting of the menorah just after sundown. Premier Wab Kinew lit one of the candles. Well, the Winnipeg Jets are on a roll.
Bullseye from Josh Morrissey.
Josh Morrissey in the second period on TSN as Winnipeg doubles the Colorado Avalanche in the Avs' own rink. 4-2 the final, the third win in a row for the Jets. Kyle Connor scoring twice, Captain Adam Lowry also with a goal, and Connor Hellebuck blocking 32 shots. Head coach Rick Bowness says his team can play with the big guys.
We want to be considered an elite team. You got to beat the teams ahead of you, and we proved tonight that we can play with anybody.
The Jets are now in third spot in the Central Division behind the Avalanche and the Dallas Stars. Winnipeg next plays Sunday in Anaheim. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells on the news desk. It's Pat Kanuga here. You're listening to Information Radio. I'm Pat in for Marcy, who's got some well-deserved time off. Abby Adiemi is behind the glass directing the show, and May McKillop is teching the show to make sure that we stay on air. Thank you, May. Lots going on in the weather this morning, so let's start with a few things. I'm going to mention a couple of things affecting some school divisions in southwestern Manitoba to start off with. So we have no buses running in the Rolling River School Division, Park West, and Beautiful Plains. No buses running. Schools are still open, though, folks, so there are still classes. And then we have the snowfall, and this is because of the snowfall warning that we have for the most of western Manitoba and northern Interlake. I'm looking at satellite imagery right now. Lots and lots of snow all the way over from Yorkton, Saskatchewan, up from Swan River, and then right down to the U.S. border through Melita and Turtle Mountain, and then up around that Ashern area as well in the northern Interlake and Hecla. So we could see 10 to 15 centimeters of snow, and the wind is really expected to pick up 40 gusting to 70 here in Winnipeg later this afternoon, and gusty winds this morning already. That has led to a few calls from the road from that part of the world, and Damien called, said things are very slick in Brandon. Give yourself enough travel time. Already seeing about 5 centimeters of snow. And Kelly, heading to work to the Carberry Hospital, said number 1 westbound Brandon to Carberry is down to 1 lane. It's slushy and icy, and she saw an accident with emergency crews tending to it already. We also heard from commuter Keith from Glenborough. He commutes up to Brandon every day. He said Highway 2 has a thin layer of snow. Visibility is good, even with the traffic around, and he's going to let me know how Highway 10 is. And then I see more snow on Highway 10 as he heads west, and it's getting deeper. And the only thing about this is commuter Keith says, P.S. need a lot more snow for snowmobiling. Thank you for that note, commuter Keith, on your commute this morning. 788-3093 is the traffic line to reach Abby, who is manning those traffic phones this morning. I'm just going to let you know what the forecast is for Winnipeg here. So we're 1 right now, going to hover around that 1, and we could see 5 to 10 centimeters of snow by late tonight. Now, it's going to be wet snow because we're hovering at that 1, and as mentioned, the gusty winds to 60 this afternoon. So your drive home while you're listening to Up to Speed here on CBC Radio 1 could be a little bit messy. I expect a cloudy day as well. Tonight, we'll get down to a -7, tomorrow -5, a -6 on Sunday to plan your weekend. Mix of sun and clouds on Sunday. Next week, we're still way above average for this time of year. A -2 for Monday, -7 on Tuesday. Average daytime high is -9, but way off in the distance, I see a 3 on the plus side next Thursday. Brandon, you're 0 with light snow falling, and temperature's going to fall to -2 this afternoon, making some of that wet snow freeze. Tonight down to -8. It will really freeze overnight. And tomorrow for Brandon, a mix of sun and cloud and a high of -4. Thompson, you're -10. You're cloudy on the way to a -7 today, -13 tonight, and tomorrow cloudy and -15. We're hovering at 0 in most of central and southern Manitoba this morning, and not really moving too much from those temperatures, hovering around 0. Coming up next on the show at 7:38, Let's talk about a story that when I saw this morning we're going to be doing, I was super interested in. Now, the Garrick Hotel's bar staff are wondering what's inside an old safe that sat in the pub for years. After 2 locksmiths failed to get the safe open, the pub staff knew who to call. Rick Amazzini is a Winnipeg Transit driver and hobbyist safecracker. He made headlines over the summer when he traveled to Baltimore to crack a bookstore safe that had eluded a dozen other safecrackers. On Saturday night, Rick will take on the Garrick Hotel's bar safe in a live safe-breaking event, and he says he's confident he can crack the safe, but isn't sure what he'll find inside. And Rick joins us in studio this morning. Good morning, Rick.
Hello.
It's nice to have you here with us. It's an interesting hobby you have. Let's start talking about Saturday. What do you know about the safe they're going to be working on at the Garrick?
I was there ready to check out the safe. Excuse me. And from what I could see is 2 other locksmiths have drilled it, and they still weren't able to get in, which is very confusing to me because this is generally a very easy lock to get into. So it's very confusing to me why they couldn't get in. And after feeling the lock, everything feels like it should feel. So I'm pretty confident we'll be able to get in. We don't know what we're going to find inside, but usually these things are empty.
It's kind of like Al Capone's vault, right?
Exactly.
The big lead up and then...
Exactly.
But maybe there's dough in there or gold. You never know.
Because the building was sold.
Right.
So somebody could have left and forgot to empty it. But usually people don't leave safes without emptying them.
With gold or dough in there. Do you have any idea when the last time the safe might have been opened? Do the owners there now know anything about it?
I didn't really talk too much with the owners about it. I just was there just to look at it and make sure that everything was working properly and that we could actually get into it.
And the drilling that's been done already, does that hamper you at all?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't understand why they drilled where they drilled, because where they drilled has nothing to do with trying to get into the safe. So that's why I'm all sorts of confused with what happened there.
Okay, now the big question, how the heck did you get into safe cracking?
This all started because when I got my gun license for target shooting, part of the rules are you got to have your guns in safes. So safes are very expensive. So what's the first thing we do? We go online and look for a used safe. I found one. The problem was no combination.
No combo.
And I thought to myself, for $40, I'll take a chance on this thing and dial every combination if I need to. And so that's what I started doing. And then I thought maybe I can go online and see if there's any kind of information on how to do this. So I found some resources, and after 17 days of about 2 to 3 hours a day, I finally figured out what I needed to do, and then I did it, and she got open for me.
Wow, that's really tenacious spending that amount of time on it. You were determined. Would you say it's a hard skill to learn?
It takes a lot of patience, because what ends up happening is it's a lot of measurements and you think you're failing. So you stop and you start over. There's a lot of starting and stopping over when you first start. After a while, you start to realize what you're looking for and how to make what you're looking for come out, if that makes sense.
Okay. Now can you describe for us then, if you just, you look at a safe for the first time, what's the process that you go through from kind of start to finish?
The first thing we do is we look at the door to make sure that when I do get this thing open, the door is not going to fall, because the first thing people do is they try to grind off the hinges. The hinges have nothing to do with getting the door open.
Because of the lock.
Yes, the lock has bolts that come out on all sides. So that's the first thing we do. We make sure that if I do get this open, this door is not going to come falling down on me.
Do you need special tools? I'm guessing you need something.
No.
Not little picks or anything? Or
a stethoscope is, like in the movies, is sometimes helpful. But usually just need my hands and my eyes, and we can usually get into things. Once in a while, I have to invent some tools to help magnify readings. That's the only tools we need.
Now you're mentioning, in the movies. Again, when I heard we were talking to you this morning, right away I'm thinking of old movie scenes and cracking the safe. You mentioned a stethoscope. What are you listening for when you're moving that dial?
I'm listening for when these things called contact points, when on the dial they touch. And that's what we're listening for. People say listening for the clicks. That's what you would be listening for, and we're looking for when they actually touch. And so sometimes a stethoscope can help you hear that sooner than without the stethoscope. And so it makes your readings a little bit finer.
So what's your success rate? In the 90%, or is it?
A little bit higher.
Wow.
There's been a few that just eluded me.
Okay.
And I almost lost a battle with one. The old police credit union at 188
Princess, yeah.
which is now a church.
Yeah.
They had the safe is still in there from the credit union. So I found out about that safe, and it's a big bank vault, and I had to spend over 100 hours on there getting that safe open, but we got it.
Really? 100 hours?
Yeah, it was very, very tricky.
What do you love most about this kind of odd hobby that you've picked up?
I treat it like some people treat Sudoku. It's just a puzzle.
Okay.
Can we get this thing done? What do we have to do to get it done? And a lot of times it's you don't want to leave it without being done because you know the next step is somebody's going to come with the drill. And the thing that I like to do is no drills involved.
Drills.
Yeah.
I have to ask you this. I'm sure people listening at home or watching us on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page are wondering what are some of the things that you found inside these safes over the years?
The coolest thing I ever found was I went to a guy's house. He had this safe that he bought. Didn't know what was in it. Had it for about 15 years, I think. We opened it up to find all kinds of things. And one of the coolest things were actual gas ration coupons from World War II from Manitoba. And most of them were unused.
No kidding.
So that was pretty cool. There's been some safes with cash, but in terms of cool things, that's pretty cool.
If listeners have a safe that they need you to crack, how can they get in touch with you?
I'm on Facebook, and you can just look up Safecracker on TikTok. I got a bunch of videos on there, and you can contact me. I'd love to be contacted because this is something that I really like to do.
And this safe cracking at the Garrick Hotel bar on Saturday, what time does that go?
I'll be there about 5, and then we'll probably start around 6.
Okay. Is that live on the net or anything? Or
I'm not sure if we're going to do it live on the net, but you're welcome to stand behind me and watch.
All right. Very interesting story. Thanks for coming in this morning, Rick.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Rick Amazzini is a local safe cracker. He'll be cracking that safe at the Garrick Hotel bar Saturday night, 6 o'clock.
There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you.
Liftoff.
Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, new this season on CBC Radio 1, and always on demand on the CBC Listen app.
Dig deeper and get more from the news.
What does this land do for us?
Here on CBC News Explore.
So let's start with the why and then we'll get to the what.
Because that's what we do here. We explore news.
And that means more carbon is being released into the atmosphere.
We dig deep into the stories.
I just want to be a dad.
We slow things down and we figure it out together.
Batters were striking out way more often.
You can get it 24 hours a day and it's free.
How did this happen?
CBC News Explore. Stream free.
1 degree in the city of Winnipeg. The streets are dry outside Studio 15 here at the corner of Portage and Spence, but not dry in other parts of the province, especially that western side of the province where there's a snowfall warning. Could see 10 to 15 centimeters of snow throughout the day. We're getting calls from the highways already. Parts of number 1, number 2, and 10 are snow-packed and slippery. Part of number 1 around Carver is down to 1 lane already, so you have to slow it down a little bit out there and drive to conditions. We're going to be hovering around 0 for the most part here in the city of Winnipeg today, and I'm looking at satellite images, and the rain and snow is going to be heading east, and it should hit us this afternoon. But lots of white on these satellite pictures over western Manitoba right now, where they could see, again, 10 to 15 centimeters of snow, hence the snowfall warning from Environment Canada. At 7:47, we're going to take a look now at a story that's been in Heather's news this morning, and we might not be feeling the frigid weather so far with a 5 to 8 degrees yesterday, but it's coming. And eventually, you'll have to start plugging your vehicle in overnight to make sure that you have a easy start the next day. And that's what block heaters are meant to do, heat up the engine so that it starts easier. But earlier this week, emergency crews responded to a fire in a single-family bungalow, and early reports show the fire was accidental and caused by a block heater. Now, to learn more about how homeowners can protect themselves, we're joined by Jason Federer. He is the chief officer with the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service, and he joins us by phone this morning. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning.
So how does a block heater fire even start? I've covered a few of these over the years, but what's your expertise?
Yeah, it could be a combination of things. It could be the electrical extension cord that's being used, that's plugged into the wall, which plugs into the block heater cord of the car. or it could be the block heater cord from the car that has become damaged.
So I know the city doesn't have numbers to share, but anecdotally, how common do you think these fires are? Are you guys responding to a few of these every winter?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but this time of year when the temperatures do start dipping down, we see an increase in it, yes.
What's your thought about plugging in our cars while they're in the garage? I've always heard over the years, even if your garage isn't heated, it's always a little bit warmer than outside. And wind chill doesn't affect, obviously, a vehicle inside a garage. But what do you say to people who want to plug in their cars in the garage?
I would say definitely don't plug your vehicle in if you have it inside a garage. It's not necessary, especially if you have an attached garage to the house. If it does create an electrical arc or some damage on the cord and it does start a fire, now you're going to get extension damage into the house and puts the occupants of the house in great danger. So the biggest thing to consider or to watch out for is that you haven't parked on the cord then, correct? Yeah, parking on the cord, driving over it. I know I've done it too. I've backed away, backed the vehicle up with the vehicle still plugged in. And that puts a lot of stress on the electrical components and the cords. So what happens then is you can damage that cord, and that's one thing you have to look for in some preventative maintenance. It's just keep an eye on it and make sure it's in good condition. So what about parking outside of the garage? What do you tell people to consider? Definitely, if it's cold, plug it in. Don't have your car right up against the garage. There could be a fire flames that go up the exterior wall and into the soffits and into the attic, so it could still spread to the house. It's good to keep the car a little distance away from the house when you plug it in. Now, you mentioned driving away and pulling out that cord. Jason, I can't tell you how many times I've done that here at CBC. I made it to the Centennial Concert Hall once, and a guy beside me is like, your cord's dragging on the ground. And that can fray those cords, so I'm guessing people should inspect those cords to see what kind of condition they're in. What would you suggest on those on that front? Absolutely. As a vehicle owner, you can do a quick visual inspection. Just take a look at it, see if there's any damage, if there's any wires sticking out, see if that cord is actually frayed, see if it is broken or cracked. If you're unsure whether that is a crack or if it is frayed, get a licensed mechanic to check it out for you. What about the block heater itself? If you're using something from the 1960s, I'm guessing maybe not the safest? I'm not 100% sure. Depends if it's been upkept, you know, and taken care of, or you know, what type of condition it's been in and how many times it's been plugged in. Okay. What goes through your mind when you hear these stories about, you know, someone parking on a block heater inside the garage, there's an arc, the cord gets hot and a fire starts? What do you think of when you hear these stories in the winter? Yeah, it's definitely alarming and very concerning. It's something you can, you know, do a little preventative maintenance on and try to, you know, just stay on top of it and be diligent and just do visual checks and just stay on top of it. Well, the weather is for not plug in your car weather for the next week after this snowfall today. We're still at minus single digits all next week, so shouldn't be a problem for a little while yet. But thanks for your tips on this, Jason. I appreciate it. Oh, anytime. Thank you very much. Thank you. Jason Federer is the Chief Officer of Fire Investigation with the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service. Time right now is 7:53. We are 7 minutes away from World Report. It's Pat in for Marcy. Lots of Christmas parties tonight. Lots of people are going to be out and about with that snow. So let's have a little bit of music for you, shall we? JP Ho, the JP Ho Ho Holiday Show is happening tonight, actually, at the Burton Cummings Theatre. If you're going to go out for that, do bundle up. It's an incredible lineup of Winnipeg musicians and holiday songs, and the show has become an annual Winnipeg tradition for many. Here is a Christmas song from JP Ho right now. This is Run to Christmas Day.
Theater. It is 3 minutes exactly before 8 o'clock. Let's go to the CBC Newsroom now, and Heather Wells with news headlines.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg woman is challenging the police account of her partner's death after he was shot and killed by an officer last week. Carrie Bladen says Dustin Hatcher didn't deserve to die, despite being on the run on outstanding charges she says resulted from challenges with addictions. The Manitoba Independent Investigation Unit says a 39-year-old man was shot after an officer was pinned by a vehicle trying to flee a traffic stop near Pembina and Dalhousie Drive. And as Jewish Winnipeggers mark Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, a rabbi in Winnipeg hopes his mobile menorah can help dispel the darkness of the Israel-Hamas conflict. I'll be back with more Manitoba News at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells on the news desk. We're 2 minutes before World Report, and I just want to let you know what's happening on the highways out there. Western Manitoba, snow-packed and slippery. Commuter Keith got back to us, and you can reach us, by the way, at 788-3093. If it's safe to do so, please give us a call. Abby is standing by manning the traffic and commuter line this morning. But Keith said more snow on Highway 10, and it will toss you around in the grooves in the snow. So slow it down out there, and it sounds like there are grooves and kind of snow-packed and slippery, so take it easy out there. We do have that snowfall warning for southwestern Manitoba, and into the northern Interlake could see 10 to 15 centimeters of snow and gusty winds to 70 as we head on through this Friday. So take it easy out there. We are 1 in the downtown right now. Temperatures are going to be hovering around 0 for most of central and southern Manitoba, so it could be some heavy, wet snow today. Coming up in the next half hour of information radio, Winnipeg's Children's Hospital's emergency department is seeing a lot of high numbers of sick kids this week, almost record-setting numbers. Not all those kids needed to go to the emergency room, though. So when is a visit to the emergency room appropriate? We're going to talk with someone at about 15 minutes after 8 o'clock to let you know if it's worthy of a trip to the emergency room. That's all coming up in Information Radio. It's Pat in for Marcy. World Report is coming up at the top of the clock.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Tate McRae is coming off one of the biggest weekends of her life. The singer from Calgary performed at the Billboard Music Awards and was the musical guest on Saturday Night Live, all in 2 days.
I just started crying. It's just very cool.
Tate breaks it down and will tell you about her new album, Think Later. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
There is something unique about the love of a dog, and a drug newly approved in the U.S. can make that love last a little longer by giving your pup an extra year of life. But some dog lovers are asking if that's really best for the pet. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm John Northcott. CBC News has learned a group of Canadian Muslims is leaving the federal Liberal Party's top donor ranks. It's called the Network 100, and its members say they are frustrated by the Prime Minister's refusal to call for a permanent ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Rafi Boudjikanian reports.
Thank you, my friends. When Justin Trudeau surged to his first victory in 2015, Mohamed Abulkasim was rooting for him.
We believed the promises Justin Trudeau was marketing.
And that support was not just at the ballot box. Abulkasim was among Canadian Muslims who organized to form a group called the Network 100. They brought together not just campaign volunteers for the Liberals, but donations. They say they have collectively contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to the federal Liberals since then. But that's all changing. Abulkasim says his group has taken issue with what they believe is a soft stance by the party's leadership on the number of Palestinians killed by the Israeli military's bombings against Hamas. Though Trudeau has criticized Israel in recent weeks,
I urge the government of Israel to exercise maximum restraint.
He has not called for a permanent ceasefire. After waiting close to 2 months, the network has written to the Liberal Party president, informing him they are leaving the Laurier Club in protest. That's a donor club where the Liberals expect at least $1,700 a year in individual contributions.
We cannot sleep at night. You sleep and you get up. There's at least 50 Palestinians getting killed.
Asked about the network halting future donations, the Liberal Party said in a statement Canadians choose to donate to political parties for a variety of reasons, including to support a specific cause or policy position. Rafi Boudjikani on CBC News, Ottawa.
It has been 9 weeks of war between Israel and Hamas. In Israel, the constant threat of rockets. In Gaza, relentless airstrikes. Hundreds of thousands of people are displaced, and there are reports that is now causing huge food shortages.
We continue to recognize the extraordinary difficulty of this task, as Israel is dealing with a terrorist adversary that intentionally embeds itself with civilians.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is now pressuring Israel to do more to protect civilians.
But again, Israel has an obligation to do everything possible to put a premium on protecting civilians and maximizing humanitarian assistance. And there does remain a gap between the intent to protect civilians and the actual results that we're seeing on the ground.
The Israel Defense Forces says it has struck 450 targets in the past day, and it says it has discovered another cell preparing to launch rockets at its forces. Today, the United Nations Security Council will meet, and under intense pressure from Secretary General Antonio Guterres, it will vote on whether or not to call for an immediate ceasefire. Quebec's public sector unions are banding together, kicking off a week-long strike. That means no school for public elementary, high school, or junior college students today. The Quebec unions rejected the government's latest offer. They say workers need more money and better working conditions. Sarah Levitt has more.
Outside schools, hospitals, and health clinics across Quebec, the same symphony. Noisemakers, drums, and chanting employees on strike. New public sector worker contracts with the Quebec government unresolved. Today, the group of unions known as the Front Commun are back on the picket line for 7 days. 420,000 workers.
Ce serait un drame.
Accepting the latest offer would be a tragedy, says Magali Picard, who heads the FTQ union. The Front Commun strike overlaps with another one. The FAE, another union representing teachers, has been on an unlimited strike for 2 weeks. It means public schools across the province are shuttered for the next week. In Gatineau, English teacher Chantal Berthiaume says the strike is tough on the wallets.
There's no going to be like Christmas gift this year. It's going to be like strictly the minimum.
But she says it's worth it.
Cannot complain. I'm doing this for my kids and my students.
At the National Assembly, Premier François Legault made his impatience known.
C'est pas normal que notre réseau.
It isn't fair to have the unions run the public sector, he said. But he says the government continues to show good faith at the negotiation table to resolve these strikes as soon as possible. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
As the U.S. Congress battles over funding for border security aimed at its southern border, in Canada, the RCMP tells CBC News more migrants are turning to this country as a way of illegally crossing into the United States. The CBC's Jorge Barrera reports.
This Facebook video of a man playing in the snow in northern Vermont seems playful on the surface, but U.S. authorities say it was filmed in February by a Guatemalan national as he headed to pick up people smuggled from Quebec into the U.S. While Elmer Bran Galvez was never charged, U.S. authorities say he worked for a New Jersey-based human smuggling organization.
There's a lot of money to be made to smuggle individuals across our borders.
Mathieu Bertrand is RCMP Chief Superintendent of Serious and Organized Crime and Border Integrity Policing.
Organized crime is involved in human smuggling.
He says there's a marked increase in the use of Canada as a conduit, specifically across the Ontario and Quebec border with New York and Vermont. The most recent U.S. numbers back that up. There were nearly 7,000 Border Patrol interceptions in a 12-month period through this area. Bertrand says the cross-border nature of the issue makes it hard to tackle.
Just because an individual can be charged in the United States doesn't mean we have the grounds in Canada at the time or at any time during the investigation to do the same.
U.S. authorities say Bran Galvez's videos provided clues to help take down the organization and indict 3 people on human smuggling charges, including a man living in Montreal named Simon Jacinto Ramos. But there is currently no warrant for his arrest in Quebec. Jorge Barrera, CBC News, Ottawa.
Hunter Biden is facing 9 new criminal charges. The son of the U.S. president is charged with 3 felony and 6 misdemeanor tax offenses. Federal prosecutors are accusing him of not paying at least $1.4 million in federal taxes. They claim he instead spent the money on drugs, escorts, luxury hotels, exotic cars, and clothing. Hunter Biden's attorney claims the charges are politically motivated. And finally, good morning to everyone except employees of the House of Commons, where technically it's still Thursday. No, seriously, listen to this.
Madam Speaker, I believe that if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent.
That's right. Members of Parliament are still awake, and they're still voting on legislation they were supposed to pass yesterday. The Conservatives have made good on their threat to drag it out as long as possible. You just heard Leader Pierre Poilievre there coming forward with a motion he didn't seem to have unanimous consent for. Our Janice McGregor woke up before dawn and tuned into the proceedings while she brushed her teeth. Janice, are they still at it?
Yes, John, and they've got potentially hours to go yet. 135 votes, perhaps, in total, could last well into this afternoon, even beyond, if no one backs down here. Liberal benches on the government side still quite populated. As I woke, I saw the Prime Minister, his deputy, the Finance Minister, many cabinet ministers still voting in person, not taking any chances with these, which are confidence votes. On the opposition benches, the turnout a bit more sparse hour to hour. MPs do have the option to vote electronically in comfier surroundings if they wish, but they have to show their faces to Commons staff. They can't nap and have someone else punch it in for them. Pierre Poilievre left for a few hours last evening to attend a Hanukkah event in Montreal, but he returned to the Commons lobby late in the evening carrying massive bags of fast food to rally his MPs.
Bring it home! Bring it home! It's extra time away from family, it's hard on your health, but we have to make the point. We said we would fight to axe the tax.
House Leader Karina Gould is having to lead her troops through this all-nighter, notwithstanding the fact that she's close to going on maternity leave, and she wasn't holding back her feelings at Poilievre's tactics.
He is leading the charge when it comes to that extreme right-wing agenda that is all about shutting down the government, holding back vital supports to Canadians, and we will stand up to him.
The Conservatives say they're doing this to take a stand against carbon taxes, but these aren't actually votes about the carbon tax. The House of Commons always has to pass a set of votes near the end of the calendar year to authorize a long list of government spending estimates. Things have been known to get a bit punchy with these votes year to year, but the dial for this year's silly season seems to be turned all the way up to 11.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa, thanks for keeping a bleary eye on all of it.
You're welcome.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Well, good morning. Welcome to Friday. It is Friday, December 8th. Happy Hanukkah. And you're listening to Information Radio for this Friday. It's a bit of a stormy Friday in southwestern Manitoba and parts of the western border with Saskatchewan. We'll tell you about that right away. Coming up, it's Pat Knugan from Marcy Marscusa, by the way. I should tell you about that. She's on a much-deserved break. Ahead this half hour in the show, the Tesla Cybertruck is here, and depending on who you talk to, it's either a showstopper or an abomination. But could it herald a tipping point for electric vehicles? We'll hear about that at about 8:22. Before that, though, do you or don't you take your kids to the emergency department if they appear to be really sick? It's a question doctors want you to think about carefully as the Children's Hospital is seeing near record numbers of patients this week. We're going to speak with the medical director of HSC Children's Hospital Emergency Department in just a few minutes. Thank you for joining us this morning on what is a snowy Friday in the western part of the province and what will be a snowy, wet Winnipeg later on in the day. We'll get to those details in just a few minutes. But at 8:11, let's go to the CBC News Center. Here is Heather Wells with news headlines.
Good morning. A Winnipeg woman is demanding accountability, alleging a police officer fatally shot her partner without warning last week. Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit says a 39-year-old man was shot after an officer was pinned by a vehicle attempting to flee a traffic stop near Pembina and Dalhousie. MPI is suing Ford Motor Company of Canada over a vehicle fire the insurer claims was related to the block heater. The fire involved a Ford Escape parked with its block heater plugged in at a business in Winnipeg in 2021. We'll hear more on those stories in our next local news at 8:30.
Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
12 minutes after 8 o'clock. I am in for Marcy. Abby Adiemi is in for me. We'll get to him in just a second with weather and traffic for Winnipeg. I'm just going to let you know about that snowfall warning again. Been telling you about it all morning. Could be 10 to 15 centimeters of snow for Brandon, Neepawa, Carberry, Treeherne, Turtle Mountain Provincial Park, all parts in between there from Swan River all the way down to the U.S. border, including Riding Mountain National Park, and as well Dauphin, Russell, Roblin, and the northern Interlake, Arberg, Hecla, Fisher River, Gibsonville, Asher, in those areas as well. Winds are really going to pick up. Going to see gusts to 70 later on in the day if they haven't started already. I'm looking at satellite images this morning, as is Abby. Lots of clouds and snow on that side of the province this morning, so take it easy out there. Let's get to Winnipeg's forecast right now, and Abby is here for that.
Yes, good morning once again, Pat. Just trying to look outside. Pat, is it me or I can't really see the sun today during the high.
And you're not going to see it. It's actually 8:12 is the sunrise, but we don't expect to see it.
We don't expect to see it because it's cloudy. And just to give you a heads up, we're having the risk of freezing rain this morning. And according to John Sutter's forecast, today will be mainly cloudy most of the morning, period of wet flurries, and then we'll be having the wet snow beginning as you get into your lunch break period with a potential of about 5 to 10 centimeters by tonight. That's depending on how much melt on contact. But be advised, when it snows and with the wind we're expecting, it's going to be windy into the late afternoon and the evening. The high of today will be 1, and the wind chill will feel like minus 11 this afternoon. That wind is actually going to be gusting 10 to 15 this morning period. And then into the evening, later tonight, it's going to be gusting to almost 60 km. So brace for that. Tonight, also, like I mentioned, it's going to be wet snow blowing in open areas. You'll be expecting also about 5 centimeters of snow on the ground. And, while Pat was talking to the fire officer earlier, he made mention about, you talked about the cords and people driving off. And I whispered to Emily at the other side of the window, I said, this is going to be the season of headless winter snakes. That's what I call.
That's what Abby calls us. That's right.
That because you're going to drive on the roads and you see a lot of cords lying on the road and you wonder, where did that come up from? So headless winter snakes, that's what I call them. You're going to find them later this city.
Good news is you don't need those cords for a while because we're minus single digits all next week.
Yes. And now talking about commute, let's just remind you, Damien actually called from Brandon early because they are looking at the satellite image here. Brandon is already getting that.
Snowpacked and slippery. We're hearing from the highways.
Yeah, snowpacked and slippery. The number one, Kelly also called heading to Carberry. She said it's down to 1 lane. So be advised, give yourself enough time. While here in the city, we hear that civil work is happening westbound Notre Dame between Toronto and Beverly. That's the median. So you need to give yourself some time there. And also the curb lane is closed southbound Waverly between Academy and Kingsway, so you also need to brace for that. And when the snow starts blowing in the evening, you need to drive according to the condition of the highway. If you see anything in traffic, feel free to let me know. 788-3093.
It's 8:15. It's Pat in for Marcy on this Friday morning. Winnipeg's Children's Hospital Emergency Department is seeing near record numbers of sick kids. On Tuesday, there were 169 patient visits, and those are numbers similar to the hospital's busiest season ever back in 2022. Now, not all of those kids needed to go there. So when is a visit to the emergency department the right call? Dr. Karen Grip is the medical director of HSC's Children's Hospital Emergency Department. She joins us by Zoom this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. So let's talk about what you're seeing first, or what you're seeing as far as the WHO. Who is presenting at the hospital this week?
We're seeing a wide variety of patients. So for sure, still the traumas and other things that come in, but we're seeing more and more respiratory viruses every single day. So numbers have really gone up. Last month, we averaged about 130 visits a day, and now the last 2 days, we're hitting in the high 160s.
And how busy is that from what your experience is normally at, say, this time of year?
Mm. So what we're hitting is numbers that we saw last November, when everyone remembers the viral surge and the triple-demic, when all the children were getting sick. And they're also, fairly similar to where we were several years ago in 2019. And that particular winter was also one of the worst we'd ever seen, and where we were hitting numbers in the low 200s by Christmas time. So it's definitely out there.
So you're seeing lots of respiratory symptoms, but what other illnesses? Are we seeing colds, flus, that sort of thing as well?
Yep. Influenza seems to be the favorite virus this week. We're seeing a ton of kids with influenza, still COVID, still RSV, other viruses as well, adenovirus and other viruses. But the big three are influenza, COVID, and RSV.
So we talked about kind of what you're seeing as far as symptoms. Who are you seeing? Are we seeing toddlers to teens? Is there a more specific age range?
Generally, we're seeing the under 10, especially the under 5. The older patients will often come in because of fevers, and parents are really worried about the fever, which is a good talking point. But the under 5, many of those children haven't been really sick before, and they don't have the reserve. So especially the really tiny ones, they haven't really been sick, and they don't have the reserve to really kind of get through it from a respiratory distress point of view. So they come in, and patients with respiratory distress should come in.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. Not all of these kids needed to go, and we'll talk about kind of when you should and when you shouldn't in a second. But how many of these cases that you've talked about, of these numbers this week, any idea maybe how many could have gone somewhere else as far as not going to the emerge?
Yeah, in our triage system, we estimate probably at least a third probably could have gone somewhere else, or even better, stayed home. Parents are worried. That's understandable. That's our job as a parent. But, kids do get sick. So a fever and a cough and a runny nose, but they're not having any trouble breathing, they can safely stay home and be cared for at home. We've been seeing some stomach viruses, vomiting and diarrhea, but even if they're just mildly or moderately dehydrated, they can stay home as well. And if patients and parents aren't sure what to do, HealthLinks is just a call away to help.
That was my next question, because there's always a what if, especially when you have, under 10s and even younger, you get so worried. What if they get more sick? What if that cough gets worse? Again, what's your advice to determine when it's appropriate to head to the emergency then? Is there a level of, there's worry there, but what's the level that you would kind of say, yeah, okay, bring them in?
Mm-hmm. Well, I always like to tell parents to trust their intuition. So parents know their child the best, and that is very true. On the other hand, there are some specific things to look for, as you mentioned. The big one is trouble breathing. So really fast breathing, especially when the fever is down, really difficult breathing, wheezing, pulling in, using their ribs and their abdominal muscles to breathe. Anything like that, especially in the under 2 crowd, is a concern. In terms of dehydration, if they haven't had any urine output in 12 hours, if they're so lethargic that you can't wake them up, those would be reasons to bring them in.
So Dr. Grip, when you get this many patients coming in, what's it like for staff on the ground when it's that busy?
It can get crazy sometimes. And our staff really want to take care of every child as best we possibly can. But when it gets busy, when we have, 20 or more patients presenting in an hour, which does happen, especially in the afternoons and evenings, we have to see the sickest patients first.
Of course.
And what that means, if you're triaged to a lower level, which is a good thing, by the way, it means you might wait a long time. Hopefully not 4, 6, 8 hours, but it may be that you'll wait because we have to take care of the sickest patients first.
What's your sense as we move towards the holiday season of how busy it's going to be for the next 3-4 weeks?
Everything is going up, all the viruses. So I think it's going to be very busy. The holiday time period is also when people get together and socialize. So that can increase the viral burden as people are sharing other things, not just eggnog, they're sharing viruses as well. The other thing that we do see, though, sometimes it helps because the kids are not in school. So it depends, but we definitely expect Christmas and New Year's period to be very, very busy.
Is this weather helping at all? Because we're not cooped up inside. People are still out and about doing things when you're, at a +5 yesterday.
It does. If it was sustained, like a summertime period, we definitely see fewer viruses in the summer because, like you said, people are outside, and if they're hanging out together, they're more distanced rather in the room. So maybe it will make a difference. We'll know in the next week or two.
And Dr. Grip, I wanted to end on vaccinations. We have the trifecta this year: the flu, RSV, and COVID. What's your message to parents?
Mm-hmm. My message is, get vaccinated if you can. Get your child vaccinated if you can. Vaccines are safe. COVID and influenza vaccines have now been around for a long time. Influenza, of course, much longer than the COVID vaccine. They're safe. They're effective. They can make a difference, not only for the person getting vaccinated and their family, but their friends and then the extended community.
Thanks for your time on this important topic this morning, Doctor. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Happy holidays to you.
Same to you.
Dr. Karen Grip is the medical director of HSC's Children's Hospital Emergency Department.
Everybody knows a turkey and some mistletoe help to make the season bright. But singing along to Yuletide classics and new holiday favorites is what really makes the holly jolly. CBC Music unwraps the gift of holiday playlists to get you into the festive spirit. From pop to jazz, gospel, folk, blues, classical, country, and so many more. Now available on the CBC Listen app.
It is 23 minutes past 8 o'clock. You're listening to Information Radio. It's Pat in for Marcy. Thank you for joining us on this, what's so far a dry morning here in the city of Winnipeg, very wet out in western Manitoba. If you're out and about celebrating Hanukkah tonight, Hanukkah parties, going to friends and families, or Christmas parties, it's going to be a blustery one and probably pretty wet and messy as we get into the late afternoon, into the evening. So do know that we're going to see those wind gusts to 60 or 70 later in the day. It is one in the downtown, been there all morning. Up next on the show, it's one of the oddest looking vehicles ever made in North America, and it's finally out to the consumer. Tesla has just started delivering its new pickup truck, the Cybertruck, to customers. And is it a game changer that the CEO Elon Musk says it is? CBC's Manuela Salvaraja takes a look.
There were flashing lights, loud music, and an audience in rapture. But it was no nightclub. It was a car delivery event for Tesla's first electric pickup, the Cybertruck.
Hey. So once in a while, once in a long while, a product comes along that is rare.
That's from Tesla's live stream of the event, where one could watch as CEO Elon Musk personally escorted a few owners into their new pickups.
So these are the actual owners. We're handing over production Cybertrucks to their actual owners. Thank you for buying Cybertruck.
Here in Canada, Sean Robertson went by the Tesla showroom in Langley, BC, to see the only Cybertruck on display in the country.
There was a lineup to get in, and I got there at 5, and they were cutting off people from coming in just after I arrived. So the interest is definitely there.
Robertson runs the website myevtrips.com, where he documents his road trips in an electric vehicle. The Cybertruck comes in 3 models: a rear-wheel drive, an all-wheel drive, and the Cyber Beast. Yes, the top-of-the-line model is called the Cyber Beast. So what did Robertson make of the Cybertruck he saw up close?
It's definitely shock value, I think, is what they're partially going for. It's obviously very futuristic, very shiny, definitely different than anything on the road today.
It looks like something out of a science fiction movie. Mark Coughlin says that design gets a polarizing reaction.
Definitely, people's views are all over the board. A lot of people like it, a lot of people hate it. There's not a lot of people that are in between.
Coughlin founded the Waterloo Region Electric Vehicle Association to promote EV adoption around Waterloo, Ontario. The Cybertruck has some unusual features for a pickup. The company says the quickest model goes from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 2.7 seconds. The front windshield is the largest piece of glass ever installed on a vehicle. And then there's the matter of the shiny stainless steel exterior.
It's a hard surface that is not easily marred by anything hitting it. As we saw from the videos, even bullets have a hard time penetrating it. So a simple door ding in a mall parking lot is not going to be an issue anymore for people who own this vehicle.
But on Facebook, on pages created by the Cybertruck fans, some followers ranted about the range and price revealed at the delivery event, different from the expectations Elon Musk set in 2019. Back then, Musk said prices would start at $40,000 US, and that the top model would have a range of 800 kilometers. Instead, the top range is nearly 550 kilometers, and the pricing starts near $60,000 US, $20,000 more than buyers expected. This is Tesla's unconventional first step into the lucrative business of making and selling trucks. Pickups bring in high profits and top the list of best-selling cars in North America. So the question is, can Tesla take a slice of this market? Sean Robertson says it won't be easy.
I think, maybe this is just personal, but like the truck market, your average truck buyer, I don't know, how do I say this? Like, it's kind of anti-EV, so it's a tough sell maybe to some of those potential buyers.
It's not just the popular gas-powered trucks like the Ford 150 and the Chevy Silverado that Tesla has to battle. Since 2019, other manufacturers have rolled their electric trucks off the production line. And these pickups, like the Ford F-150 Lightning and the Rivian R1T, offer comparable pricing and range. But Mark Coughlin says Tesla has managed to upstage the competition before. Take the Tesla SUV, the Model Y. It's one of the best-selling cars in the world. Here's Coughlin.
I don't know how much market share it will take away. It's a high-end item. There are lots of Tesla owners out there. In fact, about over half the EVs sold in Canada are Teslas. So you've got a fan base that's already built. They're entering into a new segment. They're going to bring some of those people along for the ride.
But a voice from within the company points to the real obstacle the Cybertruck faces, producing these cars at scale. On a recent call with investors, Elon Musk said special products like the Cybertruck were, in his words, incredibly difficult to bring to market to reach volume. So until the next Tesla earnings call, we'll have to watch our roads and social media feeds to see if the Cybertruck catches on. For CBC Radio, I'm Manjula Selvarajah.
We're not supposed to have an opinion being a journalist, but I'm retiring in 2 weeks, so I'll just say that is one ugly truck, in my opinion. Thanks to Manjula for that. It is 8:29, 1 minute away from the news at 8:30. It's time to thank all the folks that put our current affairs shows together here at CBC Manitoba. Associate producers Wendy Parker, Corey Funk, Abby Adiemi, Nolan Kaler, May McKillop, Bruce Layden, Chloe Friesen, Dylan Longhurst, Jim Agapito, Issa Kixon, Chidi Akuma, Kalkaden Mulugeta, Sierra Sanders, community reporter Shanley Vidal, great to have her back on Information Radio, YouTube producer Travis Peterson, who's done a great job all week. Nellie Gonzalez is the show's producer. She is the producer of the Current Affairs Unit, and Leif Larson's the senior producer of audio. It is 1 degree in the city of Winnipeg. If there's any last-minute traffic notes to pass on, Abby Adiemi is standing by at that traffic line at CBC 788-3093. I forgot to mention producer Margot Watt. Thank you, Margot Watt, for all you do here as well. The time right now is 8:30.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is cloudy. It's 1 degree. We're expecting some wet flurries becoming wet snow later this afternoon, becoming windy, a high of 1. If you are in southwest Manitoba, western Manitoba, the Interlake, parts of central Manitoba, there is a snowfall warning, 10 to 15 centimeters of heavy snow. Starting, some areas are seeing it now. Other places will see it starting this afternoon. So do be careful out there. A Winnipeg woman is challenging the police account of her partner's death after he was shot and killed by an officer last week. Carrie Bladen says Dustin Hatcher didn't deserve to die, despite being on the run on outstanding charges she says resulted from his challenges with addictions. Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit says a 39-year-old man was shot after an officer was pinned by a vehicle trying to flee a traffic stop at Pembina and Dalhousie. Bladen is disappointed at how Hatcher is being portrayed.
He was a good man. Nobody's perfect. We all have our flaws, but he was a good dad. Was kind.
Bladen is afraid the IIU's investigation will absolve the officer who shot Hatcher. She hopes speaking out will help bring him justice. The IIU and the Winnipeg Police did not comment as the case is under investigation. MPI is suing Ford Motor Company of Canada over a vehicle fire the insurer claims was related to a block heater. The fire involved a Ford Escape parked with its block heater plugged in at a business in Winnipeg. The lawsuit alleges the fire was caused by defects in the design or manufacturing of the 2014 Ford Escape or its block heater. The lawsuit seeks nearly $16,000 for the loss of the vehicle and other costs. That fire happened in November of 2021, but the lawsuit was filed last month. Ford has not yet filed a statement of defense in court. A company spokesperson has declined comment. Well, MPs have been up all night in a marathon voting session in the House of Commons, and the voting is still underway this morning.
Madam Speaker, I believe that if you seek it, you will find Canadians cannot afford.
There is no unanimous consent on the motion.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre sparring with the Speaker. The Conservatives have put forward a long list of amendments and motions to what was already a lengthy legislative session. It's a delay tactic the party has launched as part of its opposition to the government's carbon pricing policy. As it stands now, it is possible the voting will continue all day and into tonight. Government House Leader Karina Gould says Poilievre is using, quote, extreme right-wing tactics to shut down the business of government. New Democrat Charlie Angus is accusing the Conservatives of legislative abuse. Winnipeg's fire paramedic service is warning people not to plug in their car's block heater inside a garage after a fire this week. When crews got to the bungalow on Kingsbridge Court, flames had spread from the garage to the house. Jason Federu is the chief officer of the fire investigation. He says block heater fires start for a number of reasons.
It could be a combination of things. It could be the electrical extension cord that's being used that's plugged into the wall, which plugs into the block heater cord of the car, or it could be the block heater cord from the car that has become damaged.
Federu says it is important to make sure your cords aren't frayed or cracked before plugging in. He says if you plug in your vehicle outside, make sure it's far away from the house or garage just in case there's a fire. And he says it's not necessary to plug a car in when it is inside a garage. And a holdover from the pandemic is fast becoming a Winnipeg holiday tradition.
Happy Hanukkah.
Rabbi Baruch Hadingsfield first put a giant menorah on the back of a truck back in 2020. It was a way to help people celebrate Hanukkah safely during the days of social distancing. He and his family are back on the streets again this year to spread joy and light throughout the 8-day festival.
The menorah is traditionally lit at night, and we go around the streets of Winnipeg in the evening, going around the residential areas, getting a lot of positive feedback from that as we spread the message of Hanukkah. That message, be able to have a little bit of light, can dispel a lot of darkness.
Hadingsfield hopes his mobile menorah can help dispel the darkness of the Israel-Hamas conflict. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather. Have a fabulous weekend.
You too. Thank you.
She is Heather Wells with the CBC News here. She'll be in till 11:30 this morning, bringing you news headlines and newscasts at the top of the hour. It's Pat in for Marcy. We have 2 minutes left in the show. Let's talk about what's happening today. Weather-wise, Abby Adiemi is here.
Yeah, weather-wise, I'll just link it with traffic because what we're expecting, be prepared for your driving conditions to really change as you head home during your commute home this evening. But currently, Winnipeg, we've been at 1 all morning. We stopped at 1, and according to John Sutter, it's gonna be mostly cloudy the most of the morning, and then the wet snow is going to start in the afternoon, and we're expecting 5 to 10 centimeters of snow. And of course,
the wind is going to be really something.
The wind is going to be something, but you're talking about the warning all morning.
Yeah, so that's Winnipeg 1, and we're going to be getting that. Winnipeg's not involved in the snowfall warning as of this point. It's all for western Manitoba, all the way from Swan River down to the U.S. border, Melita area, and northern Interlake as well, Ashern, Hecla. And we're just going to see 10 to 15 centimeters millimeters of snow possibly over the next 12 or so hours into tomorrow morning. It lightens up tomorrow morning, but it's going to be a blustering out there. I've been hearing from the highway, snow-packed and slippery around Brandon, and of course Brandon is included in the snowfall warning as well. But it's a little dicey out there on the highway, so take it easy out there. If you're out and about tonight, celebrating Hanukkah parties, family parties, or Christmas parties, it's going to be blustery tonight and pretty wet here in the city of Winnipeg as well, so take care. I've enjoyed filling in for Marcy the past 3 days. Emily Brass is going to be hosting the show next week, and I'll go back to my spot behind the glass where I am most comfortable. So thank you for listening. It's really appreciate all the feedback we get here. If there's anything you ever want to tell us about, anything you hear, our listener line is 788-3205. I would say operators are standing by, but no, the tape machine is standing by to record your calls. Have a great, safe weekend, everyone. Once again, it's Pat in for Marcy. The Current is next.